Hey everybody, my name is Dave Jackson and this is Tales from the Backlog, a video games podcast where I bring in guests to talk about the games we play. I have two wonderful guests today. Both are returning from previous episodes of the show, and both are blood drunk hunters. First up, we have Yarnum Coffin Baron Moonborne.
Hello.
Good to have you back, Moon.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
And we are also joined today by Jake Anderson, who is breaking out of his walking sim typecasting. Congratulations, Jake. I'm so happy for you.
Wait, Bloodborne isn't a walking sim? I played it way wrong.
Well, you do a lot of walking, so we may have to reevaluate what genre this game is. But first, gentlemen, before we start, we have to do a contract.
Oh, no.
Oh no.
I wasn't told about this ahead of time.
Wait, what are these little gremlins crawling up my leg? Oh no.
And today we are going to be talking about Bloodborne, which is an action role-playing game developed by FromSoftware and published by Sony in 2015. The elevator pitch for Bloodborne, if you've never played it, is Dark Souls-ish combat, but super stylish and fast in a gothic Victorian horror setting. This is a long elevator ride. Sound right to you guys?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. But before we get into Bloodborne, we always start the show with a little warm-up discussion about what we've been playing recently. So, guys, I will kick to Moon first. What have you been playing recently?
I am on a doomed marathon to try to replay all the Soulsborns before Elden Ring releases late next month. So I've been playing a lot of Dark Souls Remastered recently. I'm playing a lot of Sakuna of Rice and Ruin, which is a lovely brawler farming sim hybrid that I love a lot. It's pretty long, so I've been slowly piecemealing that as well.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, we had the Dark Souls episode that aired on this show by the time people are hearing this. Tell people about Sakuna, because I know you've been playing that for a long time and you really enjoy that. And I feel like that's a game that I know I haven't mentioned on the show, so maybe a lot of people aren't super aware of what that game's all about or what makes it good.
Yeah, okay. So it is a game that is rooted in, like, I guess, feudal Japanese mythology about a Japanese goddess of harvest who commits a very MCU Thor-like sin and gets damned to, the lower realm, to live with humans. And she has to atone for her sins by growing a rice farm to make up for all the rice that, she's robbed of the goddess she's supposed to supply as a bounty. And it's, in mechanically, it is equal parts a 2D brawler, kind of like, a Vanillaware game, kind of like, I feel down. I forget their names all of a sudden. Like Muramasa the Demon Blade. It's a little bit like that in terms of combat. But the other half of it is, and forgive me if I'm making a bad comparison because I don't really play Sims at all, but kind of like a Harvest Moon style farming sim on the opposite half of it. And these two halves of the game kind of form a feedback loop where you go on your hunting, your brawling, to collect ingredients and hunt animals and, the like, so that you can make food at home and grow rice. And then, you grow the rice and the food at home so that you can, in turn become more powerful. It's an RPG in that respect, where the RPG side of the rice farming makes you stronger so that you can hunt more, which allows you to, gather more for rice. And it's got a pretty lovely story, gorgeous visual style. The characters are much more well written than they have any right to be in this kind of game. This is the kind of thing that makes people doubt, but it's less of on paper it sounds like it would be like very anime, but it's less of an anime game and more of like a Japanese mythology game, if that makes sense. Like, if you're the kind of person who's worried that character's gonna like freak out and start speaking at 1,000,000 miles a minute while a chippy face happens, like that doesn't happen in this game. It's not
Okay.
that kind of thing. It carries itself with nothing wrong with those kind of games or that kind of style, but it carries itself with just a little bit more, like, I guess, self-reverence. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, gotcha.
yeah,
Cool.
I love it a whole lot. It's one of my favorite games the year it came out. I believe it was like 2020 when it came out. It was in development hell for like 7 years. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I saw you've been putting your playthroughs up on your YouTube channel, right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, cool. So if you want people to go look at those, I'll link those those playthrough
yes,
videos.
Please. I'll send you links later. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that I know that like you've spoken highly of it, and when it first came out, a lot of like YouTube reviewers were talking about it. But I'm kind of allergic to like farming sim and like crafting based games, so I just kind of like put it aside. That's just my preferences. But glad you're enjoying it for sure.
Yeah, it's a great time.
Yeah, and Jake, dude, what have you been playing?
The main thing I've been playing lately has probably been Ghost of Tsushima. And absolutely loving it, and even got Bloodborne armor in it. A little call out to Bloodborne exists in that game on the DLC island, which is fun.
Oh yeah.
I've dipped a little bit into Bloodborne just to play it, before doing the show, but didn't do a whole ton. And then I've also just on the side been playing both Neo and Neo 2 because they're fun. One of them's on my laptop, one of them's on the PS5, so depending on what's available, I just, if people are using the TV, I play Neo 1 on the laptop. If no one's using the TV, I either play Ghost or Neo 2 on that.
Playing two Neo games concurrently?
Yeah, because I've played both of them quite a bit before, so it's just like I'm in the mood for that type of action and loot loop, and so if the TV's being used, I at least have, Neo 1 on the laptop, so I can kind of feed that need that I have right now.
Yeah, for sure.
7+ minutes in, and we're already on that sicko nonsense. Neo 1 and 2 at the same time.
Yeah. That's how I do things. I'm terrible at finishing games or playing games in any sort of like focused way for the most part.
Yeah, we've had some sicko like gamer behavior on the show before, but playing both Neo games at the same time is up there in the sicko rankings for sure. But I definitely know what you mean, like about wanting a particular kind of game and like, you want that kind of action or that kind of loop, and like kind of like Moon with replaying Dark Souls. I got the big like, I want to have action combat recently. I got a big itch for that. And so I've been playing through Dark Souls. Well, I started Dark Souls 2 and I was like, this isn't exactly what I want. And then I started Dark Souls 3 again. So like I definitely know like you need that particular thing. You got to find the right game for it. So as we get ready for Elden Ring, we're recording this about a month before Elden Ring comes out. This episode will be out after Elden Ring releases, but I was definitely like, I need something in that vein to kind of like get me up for it. And Dark Souls 3 happened to be exactly what I want to play. So yeah, definitely get that. And I'm not playing both of them at the same time, so I am not.
Sure you aren't.
Oh, I've bounced between Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 before.
Yeah.
Just playing kind of all of them.
Yeah.
Well, if it makes you boys feel better, I am kind of dabbling in yet another Devil May Cry 3 replay and Astral Chain at the same time, which isn't quite the same thing, not the same series, but some of the same people, same legacy, so it's kind of the same. So if you want me to be on your sicko train, I can, so.
Yeah. Cool. So let's see. What do you guys say we get into talking about Bloodborne?
Let's do it.
Yes.
All right, so talking about Bloodborne, and the spoiler wall is in effect for this episode, just like most episodes of the show. Bloodborne has a story. I actually think that Bloodborne has a more, beginning, middle, and end story, not like directly while you're playing, but there is like a more complete story, in my opinion, for you to uncover. So we'll save story talk until the spoiler section. And then anytime we talk about a game that has like really interesting levels or interesting boss fights that you should experience for yourself, we'll save those for the spoiler section as well. So we always begin the show by talking about our histories with the game and what got us interested in playing, when did we first play it, and things like that. So we are going to start with Moonborne because it's half of your name here. What got you interested in playing Bloodborne for the first time?
Well, for one, that was supposed to be a secret, so thanks. But
you said it on the last show. You said it.
Shh. But anyway, two, my Bloodborne is, the short of it is that Bloodborne is ultimately the first Soulsborne or Souls-like game I actually got into. I did previously try the original Dark Souls, like it was like maybe 3 years prior. I very much made the unoriginal mistake of going to the graveyard and getting mad and then returning the game. Mm-hmm. Then I tried Demon Souls, got all the way to got all the way to Fool's Idol. Could not be here. Was basically stuck for like 16 hours in that game, which is very funny in retrospect because I can beat Demon Souls in like 16 hours now. But
right.
But I was stuck there, and I was like, man, this is really hard. But man, I really, really, really like this setting with bells and darkness and tentacles and screaming people. And then when I got my PS4 the following year, this was 2016, just because, shout out to, James Stephanie Sterling and the buddies on their podcast, they were talking about Bloodborne incessantly when it came out. For a good year, they were talking about it. And I was like, I guess I got to try this. So, I bought my PS4. There was a buy 3, get 2 deal. So I bought Batman Arkham City, the bad Devil May Cry reboot, and Bloodborne. Not expecting Bloodborne to be the one I got addicted to, but I did. And I was like almost instantly hooked on basically the entirety of Tower of Latria, expanded to being a game, basically, entirely. Yeah. And it was all downhill. It was, not all down. Not that sounds damning. Not all downhill from there, but I went to marathon the entire rest of the series after that, and Bloodborne is still not only my favorite Soulsborne, it is my favorite video game of all time. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon.
Right on. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, so I had bounced off Dark Souls 1, bounced off Dark Souls 2. I liked the idea of the games for sure, and I just couldn't get into it. It just wasn't working for me. I couldn't wrap my head around the slow, methodical pacing and everything like that. And then it was in 2017, I went back and checked my trophies for my first Bloodborne trophy. I was like, okay, it was February 2017, so that was when I started playing it. But what actually got me to give it a try was I had started getting the itch for something difficult, and I'm like, I've bounced off Dark Souls 1, I've bounced off Dark Souls 2. Neo was new at the time, so I went and picked that up, and I was getting the hang of kind of the difficult, it's okay to die, all that type of stuff. But I was like, but I keep hearing about Bloodborne. It's at the top of every best game to get on your PS4. And so I took a break from Neo, picked that up, and kind of like Moon said, I just, that was it. I was hooked. I was sucked in, and I just played it relentlessly and absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I have a very similar kind of thing there where when I played Dark Souls, but I actually really loved Dark Souls the first time I played it. People can listen to the Dark Souls episode of the show. You'll get my story on that. But I bounced off halfway, maybe a quarter of the way through Dark Souls at Capra Demon. That was my bounce off point the first time. But then I went back and I really loved it. And I actually bounced off of Dark Souls 2 when it released because of the Ruins Sentinel fight, which I think sucked. And so I didn't really think about when Dark Souls 3 came out, I didn't even know it came out, like, at all. I was not paying attention to games at the time. And so, like, I never had a PlayStation until I got a PS4 in, like, 2019. So I didn't know that Bloodborne existed until I got the PS4. I started looking at those lists, like, oh, hello, you new person with a PS4. Here are the best PS4 exclusives to play. And in 2019, it was, stuff like God of War and Uncharted and all of these things like that I wanted to catch up on. But Bloodborne was always like at the top. It was like, hey, Uncharted, that's cool. God of War, good game, very good game. But Bloodborne's number one on all of these lists. Persona 5 also on those lists. And so I was like, well, fuck, I guess I got to play Bloodborne if literally everyone says it's the best one. And that really, just like you guys, I fell in love with Bloodborne almost immediately. And then it sparked my like interest in the Dark Souls series and stuff. So I played through all 3 of the Dark Souls games after I beat Bloodborne, like, again, replayed some of them and stuff like that. And then totally, like, I'm a FromSoftware convert now. Like, I played Sekiro as soon as I could. I played the Demon Souls remake. That was the first thing I played when I got a PS5. It was most of the reason I wanted a PS5. So when people ask, like, what's your favorite game? If you say, hey, I do a podcast about video games, which is not information I just throw out there freely. But like when it does come up, people are like, what's your favorite game? And I'm like, oh, it's probably Bloodborne. Like, it's a weird question to answer, but like, it's the first game that pops up into my head. I really, really love this game. So all 3 of us are huge Bloodborne fans. The game is not perfect, which I'm sure we'll get into throughout the course of the episode, but it's good to have 3 Bloodborne fans on the show for this episode. Just for people who are curious about how long it takes to play Bloodborne, it took me 58 hours, my first playthrough. That includes the DLC. And I replayed it back in October because I don't play scary horror games, but I did want to play Bloodborne in October. And it took 35 hours my second time. So like playing it for the second time, that playtime does go down, but it's not a short game. As none of the, from Dark Souls 2 onwards, none of those games are really short. So yeah. Do you guys remember like maybe your first or second time? Maybe not if you've replayed it like 10 times, but how long did it take you guys to play?
If I may go first, if that's okay, I guess. I remember checking it, and this was with a full playthrough, including the DLC, because I played it after that came out. The in-game clock said 191 hours, and I was floored. In retrospect, I'm pretty sure part of that is because it continues to count if you keep the game running and put it in sleep mode, which I did quite a bit of the time, because when I was playing it, I did 2 things. I worked both of my shitty part-time jobs, and I played Bloodborne, and that was what I did. So like I would just have the PS4 running all day. Every time I had to get lunch or something like that, I would just leave the game running, put it in sleep mode, go do whatever, and then come back. So I'm sure a significant portion of it was just that. But I did put tons of hours, and it probably took me way longer than a lot of other people, because like every boss was a wall boss to me, because I was very new to this kind of thing. So.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know an exact, like, how many hours, but I know based off of, like, my trophies that, like I said, I had started it up in February, and my first ending trophy was in May. Okay. I did kind of bounce back and forth a little bit because Dark Souls 3 came out in that time, and I was in such the mood, and so, like you said, hooked on FromSoftware at that point, that I was like, I gotta try this now, even though I was really into Bloodborne, I was like, I gotta check out Dark Souls 3 as well. And I remember there was one week where my wife and the kids were like down in California visiting grandparents, and I couldn't go because I needed to be working. I couldn't get the time off, and that's like all I did. I would play Bloodborne. Okay, no, I gotta play some Dark Souls 3. Okay, no, I gotta play some Bloodborne. Okay, no, I gotta just back and
Oh,
forth,
God,
and
this
then
again.
and then work, and that's like all I did for like a week, and then I eventually set Dark Souls 3 aside and just focused on Bloodborne and finally beat it through. But I mean, I have a ton of characters on there. The one that I eventually beat the game with and went into New Game Plus and stuff has over 100 hours on it because I've just done a ton of random stuff and all that. I need to eventually go platinum it like I did Dark Souls 3, but I haven't gone through all those chalice dungeons yet.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about that for sure. So, getting into the game and talking about what makes Bloodborne special, especially in the FromSoftware series, the first thing you're going to notice when you play Bloodborne is that it looks different from a Dark Souls game. And frankly, it looks different from most action games, anything that's not horror. So Bloodborne has this kind of famous at this point dark and gothic setting in the city of Yharnam. The first thing I want to ask you guys, because this game takes place at night, there are no areas. There's one area I can think of, maybe two, that take place in a like lit up area, and there's story reasons
Two
why it
sounds
is
right,
that
yeah.
way. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
So this game takes place in the dark. It's this like kind of horror-esque setting, but I want to ask you guys real quick, do you guys find Bloodborne to be scary?
I still get hit by the jump scares sometimes, so yes. It is I once heard an argument that it's a lot more like classic horror than like modern horror, just because like it's about like that constant sense of anxiety. And even though I'm much more confident at the game, like I say that still gets me. Like I still do get freaked out, and it's because it's one of those weird things where because I'm paying attention for like every corner and all that, like I am much more high strung and likely to just kind of like jump because I heard "you're not wanted here" or whatever right around the corner, something to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I would consider it scary. I'm much more relaxed in general with these style of games now than I used to be, just because I've put so many hours into them at this point. But the jump scares still get me sometimes, and it does have that sense of kind of creeping dread and weirdness going on. So I would say it's scary.
Yeah, so this is weird because like I've said several times on this show that I hate scary games. I don't watch scary movies. I don't like, and the thing that I especially don't like is jump scares. And there's certain games like BioShock, for example, has some jump scares, and I hate it so much. FromSoft games, Dark Souls, starting from Demon Souls, if I'm remembering right, but they all have jump scares where enemies jump out from behind corners or bust through doors or something like that, or drop down from above on top of you. And like those jump scares give me a little like, ugh, like that, but it doesn't feel the same to me. And I don't really find Bloodborne to be scary. Even though there are people jumping out, and we've all played, multiple times. So half of those things, I know there's an enemy right behind this bookcase here, ready to jump out. So I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. I wanted to ask you guys, because I've been called out a few times for like saying that I hate jump scares, but these Dark Souls and Bloodborne games are full of jump scares if you're not expecting it. But for some reason, it's more like atmospheric, like horror. The setting, the sound design lends to a lot of horror stuff. In Dark Souls 3, they have the same enemy sound when you kill some of the enemies. They do that kind of like gurgling, like when they die, that Bloodborne enemies do. And there's so much sound design that goes into that horror setting in Bloodborne that's really, really good. And like the enemy designs are often horrific, things that you see around the levels. But I don't know, it just doesn't give me that same like I can't go on feeling that I got when I was playing Soma or Firewatch, Jake. So
Firewatch.
You heard it here on the show. Firewatch is scarier than Bloodborne. There we go.
Okay, if I might elaborate just a little bit further on your question about horror, is that it definitely is about like the atmosphere and like a lot of the presentation. One thing that's relevant to me is that one of the reasons Bloodborne became my new favorite game of all time is because it made me feel a certain way that I hadn't felt since I was 12 years old when I played Metroid Fusion for the first time, where, just this constant sense of dread, like these dark areas, this creepy music, something, the SAX or whatever could jump out to go after you at any moment. It was a very, very, very specific kind of fear in, the anxiety and the tension rather than like actually being scared, even though I did have a couple like designs and things where I'm like, oh god, this is gonna bother me if I think about it when I go to sleep. But for the most part, it really was just that kind of tension and that anxiety more than anything else, caused by like just the constant like high pressure point. More so, like I did mention jump scares before, but it's more about like that high pressure point that's constantly there, especially in that first playthrough, than like any individual like, oh yeah, this gave me, a scare, in the quantifiable, event that can be called a scare. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's that same level of tension while you're playing because of all the penalties for dying and how difficult it is. Those are there in all of the Dark Souls games and Sekiro too, in my opinion. So like I guess I'll say I don't find Bloodborne any scarier than I find, Dark Souls or, Sekiro or something like that. So one thing that kind of stands out visually too is that you get a lot of like, especially while you're in the city of Yharnam, you get a lot of these like really amazing vistas with this beautiful moon in the sky and this, orange colored sky, and look off in the distance and you see these great vistas with these buildings and churches and stuff like that. And I just feel like Bloodborne has a lot more moments where you'll look out in the distance, and the game gives you these vista points too. I just feel like Bloodborne has a lot more of these moments where you'll look out and be like, whoa, this looks really fucking cool. I remember Dark Souls 3 has a few of those, and Majula in Dark Souls 2 of course is beautiful, but Bloodborne I think has more of those where you're looking out over this vista and you're like, this looks incredible, and like the orange sky and stuff, it's very cool.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in Bloodborne, more than like all the other ones combined, I would sometimes just stop and look at the vistas. Or in Bloodborne, in the spot where you get the, they do a monocular instead of binoculars like you get in the Dark Souls games.
Of course.
I think it was the only one of the games where I immediately equipped it and just started looking at everything around. I didn't do that in any of the other ones, but in Bloodborne I was like, I've got to look at stuff. This is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll echo that. The monocular I definitely use specifically in Bloodborne. On my replay of the full series right now, I am endeavoring more to use like whatever equivalent those other games have to look around. But, because Bloodborne, in it, all the special, all the, visual design, like you both mentioned, but also Bloodborne's monocular is unique in that it's the only one that lets you move while you're wearing it for some reason. Like, even Dark Souls 3, which came out after Bloodborne, you can't move while looking through your, binocular type item. And, so I'm just constantly looking at every little texture, every little background detail. I get this little thrill whenever I see, like, a background, like, texture that ends earlier than it's supposed to, or you can see, like, something you're not supposed to see. And my God, like, it's killed me so much. Like, when I recently replayed Devil May Cry, I was so upset that I was like, I want to look at all this gothic imagery, and I can't look at it closely because there's no first person button. And it's like, every game needs that now. Every game just needs a Bloodborne monocular, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd be down.
I just like the more like methodical nature of Dark Souls even extends to the monocular versus the binoculars. Like, you have to stand still and use your binoculars in Dark Souls.
or it could be like Demon Souls, where for some godforsaken reason it's in third person mode. So like you see your character just doing this like a dumbass while you're trying to like look at what's in front of you. I'm going to assume they fixed that in the PS5 version, which I haven't played, but I was like, why did this? I'm like, oh my God, like what a choice.
Yeah. Going along with visuals, we often group music in with this category. So in Bloodborne, it continues the FromSoft tradition of like not having any music playing while you're going through the levels themselves. However, the bosses all have their own unique tracks, and in my opinion, the Bloodborne soundtrack is just a bit more memorable, more diverse in some ways, especially compared to like Dark Souls 1, where a lot of the boss tracks sound very similar to me. In Bloodborne, there are some tracks that I can say are like legit really, really awesome. Like Ludwig, for example, is my... it's probably the standout that all the, music channels that talk about video game music will talk about that one. But a lot of them are very, very good, and they make use of more, classical horror type strings and horns and stuff to keep building up that tension during these big epic fights. So just a quick, what do you guys think about the music in Bloodborne? Maybe as it compares to other FromSoft games or just in general.
I really like it a lot. Absolutely enjoy the music. I've just listened to it at times, especially like I'll just put it on when I'm going through, like when I was reading the Pale Blood Hunt, the fan-made lore thing, or when I'm going through the big old collector's guide that I have. I'll just put that on and glance through the art book and all that kind of stuff. I really enjoy it a lot.
I think I will definitely agree with both of you. That's very good. Also, that I prefer it to a lot of the other FromSoft, the other Soulsborne games music. The only one it doesn't top for me is Demon Souls, specifically original PS3 Demon Souls. The just really like fantastic, like, I don't know if it's literally MIDI, but like MIDI sounding like video game ass music in Demon Souls. Like, there's no way Bloodborne can ever hope to compete with that, but Bloodborne's soundtrack is pretty fantastic. And if you are looking to hear the Latin word for blood and never ever forget it over and over and over again, oh boy, I've got the soundtrack for you. Like, I've got the spooky Catholic choral arrangements for you. Like, holy.
There is a lot, and what I do like is that there's just some. It just feels like more variation in the soundtrack here. It's not all choral, background going, ha, ha, ha. It's not all like that. Like, I feel like the Dark Souls 1 soundtrack is. There's a lot more variation. And I do like how there's they're using these sounds, like, especially with the strings that we associate with horror soundtracks, that are just a little bit different from the rest of the OSTs in the series. So yeah, just a little bit about the music. It's really good. If you want to hear, I think, the standout track, again, go on YouTube, listen to the boss track for Ludwig, both forms, both of those back to back. Go listen to those. It's fantastic. You'll get a sense of what we're talking about here.
I would say really quick, just even more than the music to me, though, is just the sound effects. There's so many that, like, if I haven't played it in a while and I go back to it and I hear those sounds, when you enter a new area, when you successfully parry, there's so many sound effects that are, I feel like the emotions from the remembering when I first was hearing them, my first playthrough and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the sound design is just really good to this day. Like I'm never, like, the insight sound effect, I'm never ever gonna forget that.
Yep.
Now we can forget. We can set aside the fact that I have it set as my Discord notification tone. So but there's a reason I have it set for that. So
Yeah.
Like, I'm amazed that, like, people in public, if I actually have my phone too loud, haven't, like, just turned to me, like, freaked out, wondering what this, like, demonic whispering is or whatever. But
I already mentioned the enemy kind of the hunters or the townsfolk in Yarnum gurgling as they die. I already mentioned that. We can just talk a little bit about sound design. Like, the thing, when you brought that up, the thing that I thought of is just how, like, wet and visceral the weapons sound as they connect with enemies. It's very I mean, I've never attacked somebody with a hacksaw before, but if I were,
disappointing.
But they just make it so gross and, like, vicious when you attack enemies, more than more than in the Dark Souls games where, people are wearing armor and stuff. In Bloodborne, it's a lot of dudes with just, like, button-up shirts on, running around attacking you in the streets. And so, like, when you attack them with your big
and Matrix
weapons,
coats,
with horrifically serrated, homemade, like, contraptions.
Yeah, exactly. That's the sound effect that I think of the most. And when you're attacking the beasts, bosses, and enemies alike, the sound effects they're gross and they're brutal. It's really, really good.
Especially when, like, their arms break or whatever. I guess we'll talk about that later.
The bosses, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's take a little music break. We talked about the music a little bit. You can listen to a little bit of it, and when we come back, we'll kind of set up the story for Bloodborne. Story setup for Bloodborne as the game begins. And so I'll just ask you guys, I have made it clear on this show before, but if you're listening for the first time, when I play a lot of games, but mostly in FromSoft, Dark Souls, but also Hollow Knight, Death's Gambit, Moon and I talked about, I don't pick up on the story very well. I just kind of, like, vibe with the game, and Bloodborne's the ultimate game to just vibe with as you play through. But I do think that the story is a bit more, like I said, beginning, middle, and end, rather than just uncovering lore about what happened. You're uncovering an actual story that happened. So when you guys play Bloodborne, do you find it easy to pick up on what's going on in the story?
It's very hard to say today because I've replayed that game literally 8 times or more. So, like, there, and I feel like that's kind of endemic of, like, the Soulsborne superfan, really, where, like, where a lot of us are so immersed in, like, oh yeah, we listen to theory podcasts and we watch, like, Vadi's videos or whatever. And just, like, there comes a point where it's hard to tell how much was stuff that, like, I actually noticed versus stuff that I just kind of internalized from, fan works, essentially. I will say that I was trying to pay attention to the story when I played, just because I love the game so much. I had a very, 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 like, humorously, like, conspiracy theory idea of what was going on. Is it good if I share that real quick, considering it's not the actual story? Just real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I thought that the big twist was going to be that the kind of, like, blood drunk villagers in central Yarnum that, attack you, they call you a foul beast and they tell you to get away, etc. I thought the big twist was going to be that you were one of those, and, like, everything that you saw was just a hallucination. So that, like, every time you like fought a boss, you were actually just hacking down some poor foreigner, trying to make their way through Yarnum. Yeah. Like, like there's a character, like, who later on in the game, he makes a comment about how, oh yeah, you're still a hunter in the dream. And that, like, had me like, wait a minute, am I hallucinating all of this? Like, am I one of the bad guys? Like, just, not quite what's going on at all, but, that's the kind of, like, headspace I was in. But
Yeah.
I was trying to actively understand the story, though. Like, I really did care about it. So
I'm pretty sure that's a Black Mirror episode, what you just described there, like just beat by beat what happened there. Okay, so Jake, when you play, are you the type of person who digs deep into the lore and stuff like that?
No, I have no idea what's going on with the FromSoftware games when I play them.
Same.
I mean, I will say that as we've said, Bloodborne's a little bit easier to follow. And having listened to and read tons of theory and lore podcasts and all that kind of stuff and posts, and then playing the games, I can actually pick it up in Bloodborne. I'm like, oh, here it is, here's this, here's that, I can follow it. Whereas in Dark Souls, even though I know what's going on, I'm still like, I don't know, I don't feel it as much as I do in Bloodborne.
Yeah, and I just think, like, I'm the same way. Like, I definitely feel it more, and I definitely attribute that to the fact that you're, like I said, you're uncovering an actual story of why things are the way they are. Whereas in Dark Souls, they tell you in the opening cutscene, things are the way they are because the Age of Fire is ending. That's it, basically. In Bloodborne, there is a story that is backing up what's going on. But for you, the player character, again, just like every other FromSoftware game, this is not a story about you that you're uncovering. You're just kind of like going through and discovering it. So you are a foreigner that comes to the city of Yharnam. Yharnam is famous for a special blood ministration treatment. So your character goes to Yharnam to get this blood ministration. This is all in the opening cutscene, so I'm not really spoiling anything here. You sign a contract with a guy that, frankly, if you took one look at that guy, you would never sign a contract that he offers you. He looks fucking disgusting. But you sign a contract, and then you have possibly a nightmare. You have a cutscene where a beast comes out of the floor, but when it touches you, it catches on fire. And then these pale baby golem-looking things come out of the floor, and they grab you, and you wake up in the game.
That doesn't make sense to you? That's so easy to follow.
Exactly. I was going to say, like, I don't know what I've been complaining about. That could not be more clear.
They're like the cute little... They're like the cute little forest nymphs or whatever in Princess Mononoke, but, you know, horribly disfigured and kind of terrifying. And
yeah,
but those are just Kodama. Those are in Neo.
yeah, that's a Kodama. That's right. I forgot the name.
Those are the Kodama.
I was like, man, Neo taught me this. I know my Japanese mythology, but I can't remember.
It's the Kodama.
I do think the bath messengers are super cute, and like
they're terrifying. They freak me out, and I love them.
Yeah,
they're so cute.
They're grotesque, but they are so small and cute. Like
they just want to help you too. They're like, here. They just give you things. They're like, here's stuff.
You cannot oversell, just, at least to me, what makes those bath messengers, for me specifically, it is specifically the impossible to take seriously ghostly moans they make. Like, every time you, like, interact with them, they go, ooh, and it literally just sounds like a little kid doing a ghost voice.
It sounds like you're on Disney's Haunted Mansion.
Yeah. It's this weirdly, like, almost like intentionally silly, like, you know, effect to be like, okay, these are your friends. We gotta have them do something that makes it impossible to be scared of them.
Let's lighten it up a little bit.
Yeah.
They give you your first weapons. They make this ridiculous sound. You can put
top hats on them. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly. Or bonnets.
There was exclusive pre-order Fedora DLC, and I'm so mad because I'll never get it.
Same.
I can't make him look like a Gamergator or whatever, you know? It's like...
So that is the kind of story setup for Bloodborne, and we're going to stop here. We'll talk about the story in the spoiler section a little bit. But again, in these games, I think all Dark Souls, Bloodborne, all of these games, the story for me is not why I'm playing. The story is all, or the reason I'm playing is all about the gameplay and how it is. So we're going to talk about how the gameplay works in Bloodborne. We're going to first talk about like the changes that Bloodborne makes to the Dark Souls formula. we're not going to explain how Dark Souls works because I did a over 3-hour episode about Dark Souls. So if you want to know what Dark Souls mechanics are, go listen to that episode or go play Dark Souls or play Bloodborne. Come back to this podcast. We'll still be here. So some changes that Bloodborne made to the formula, because Bloodborne, maybe not as much as Sekiro, but other than that, Bloodborne is kind of in its own little category over to the side. So a lot of the basic things still hold, but there are some changes that they made. So the first one, maybe the most controversial one in Bloodborne, is that you no longer have Estus that recharges when you rest. You have consumable healing items called blood vials. And, I'll kick to you guys first. Losing the rechargeable healing kind of basically changes how this game works in a lot of ways. So how do you guys feel about this change to consumable healing items only?
I feel, and this is something that this is a conclusion I've come to recently because, I'm replaying Dark Souls right now for the first time since 2018. And I will say that the loss of permanent healing is a downside. I don't like that. I mean, I say loss when it was my first game, but you get what I'm saying. I will say that it is better to have the permanently set Estus. However, I will say that blood vials having a specific scaling amount that they heal is, to me, that is uniformly better to Firekeeper Souls and Dark Souls, where you upgrade your flasks. I do not like having to manually upgrade flasks. I do like that there's a specific percentage that blood vials heal, and I say it scales. It doesn't scale. It's a set percentage. It's something like 35% of your health bar, basically, I think, for each blood vial. And, that means that even when you have your health up to plus 30, you are healing, 35% of whatever that amount is, which I think is pretty nice. The one other thing, and I feel like this is what they were thinking when they made them consumable, and I understand, I think, what they were doing, even if I disagree with it, is that they wanted to kind of create this atmosphere where you'll get kind of like a dopamine rush whenever you pick up blood vials on the ground. Because, you'll be running around, you'll be running out blood vials, you'll kill an enemy, and they'll drop a blood vial, and it's like, oh, fuck yeah, I can keep going. I got more healing. And that's cool. I don't think it was cool enough to justify removing, a set amount of, healing items.
Mm-hmm.
I never had an issue with it. I know a lot of people had issue because, if you're banging your head against a particular wall, you can eventually run out and you have to go farm them. And I've always thought, yeah, that would be extremely annoying. For some reason, I have never run into an instance where I need to farm them. By the time I'm a couple hours into the game, I have hundreds sitting in my stash that just refill me every time I die. I don't know what it is, how I play differently. Maybe I retread ground a lot more than other people, so I just end up with more. I'm not sure. But I never had an issue. And I would almost never heal unless I had just killed a guy that I'm like, he probably dropped vials. I'll go ahead and use one or two. And then I just pick it up and I'm still at my max vials unless I'm at a boss. And then, I'm probably going to use all of them.
I'm much more liberal with healing, it sounds like. So, if an enemy... I like to go into every enemy encounter with full health, basically. So if an enemy tags me, I will heal. And I know that's not how a lot of people play. So I guess I go through more blood vials than you would, Jake. So, and then, here's the problem. When I was playing, too, I got to the end boss of the DLC, who I won't say what it is before the spoiler section, and I had, 180 blood vials in my thing. And especially in boss fights, too, if a boss hits me, I will back off unless I can use regain, which we'll talk about. But I will heal at most opportunities that I need to. And so, we can talk about regain here. So, part of the reason that they took away rechargeable healing is that there's a new healing system in the game where if you get hit, you'll see your health bar decrease, but it won't be gone. It will be like an orange color. and that will go away after a few seconds. But if you hit an enemy while your health bar is like temporarily gone, you'll get some of that health back, and you can keep hitting things and regain possibly all of the health that you lost for a couple seconds after you get hit. And this is really, really helpful, and it encourages you to get hit and then jump right forward and start hitting them so you can regain your health, which goes into like the combat flow of Bloodborne and why it's different. But for me, I still like... It's still a risk to jump in and start wailing away, especially against bosses. So I will back off and heal more often than not. And so, like, if you hit a boss playing the way that I do, healing as much as I do, if you hit a boss that takes you 15 or 20 tries, you're going to run out of vials. And then it's just a really shitty feeling. It was for me to be like, okay, I'm in the middle of this like boss wall. I fought this guy 10 times in a row. I've lost 10 times in a row, and I can't heal anymore. So now I need to get out of the boss and go kill some pigs to farm blood vials. And my first playthrough, I would treat Bloodborne as a kind of podcast game sometimes. I would put on a podcast and go through Central Yharnam and farm blood vials, and I had a good time. My second playthrough, I was not up for that, so it was a huge bummer every time I had to go farm vials. So there is a like kind of replacement for it. So like maybe they're thinking you're not going to be using vials as much as you might Estus because of the regain system, but I still don't like it. Although Moon, you made a really good point. The needing to like upgrade your Estus flask in Dark Souls is also a bummer. Because like, what if you miss one of those undead bone shards in Dark Souls 3? That sucks. So like, I get, encouraging you to explore and stuff like that. That's great. But, losing the recharging healing kind of sucks. I actually really like the Dark Souls 2 system where you have Estus and life gems. I think that system works, but I'm not a huge fan of the consumables.
Yeah, if I had to play like armchair game developer, I would say that like between that and the rally system, what I would say is that if they want to encourage you to heal less and use the rally system more, they do have some things in the game that support using the rally system, but at the same time, I feel like having... I feel like in Dark Souls 1, like, you can have upwards of 20, but I feel like the typical, like, impression of Dark Souls Estus is that you have 5 or 10, usually by default at bonfires. And I feel like doubling your healing kind of maybe, like, gives the wrong impression, like, to that. Like, I played Bloodborne, in earnest first, but, like, I feel like if I had maybe only, like, somewhere between 5 and 10 vials that maybe healed more and were rechargeable, and maybe a rally system that was just a little bit stronger. Maybe if, because one thing about the rally system is that if you take multiple hits in succession, you instantly lose whatever rally potential there was on those previous hits, right? Mm-hmm. So like if you take one hit that takes away 25%, and then you take another hit, takes another 25%, that first 25% is just gone. Like I think a rally system that's a bit stronger, but maybe like a lot less healing, a lot less vials, and have them just be auto recharge. I think that would encourage you to rally a lot more, personally.
The rally system really worked for me more against regular enemies in the levels. Against bosses where you're, if you just rush in there to try and regain as much as you can, I would most often just get stun locked and die. Whereas with regular enemies, okay, if they hit me once, fine, I can stun lock them and get all of that health back. And you can hit an enemy after they die, it'll still register a couple of hits, and you can get a little bit of regain after that. But yeah. So
yeah, I agree. The regain is, I use it a lot more against regular enemies because, like you said, you just stun lock them, you swing away and swing a little bit as they're falling to the ground, and you're missing just a tiny little sliver of health instead.
Mm-hmm.
Have either of you ever done the tricks for free blood bullets?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's somewhat circumstantial, but one of the other related mechanics is that you can sacrifice some of your health to make extra bullets, basically, for your gun. And there's a pretty sweet, badass feeling setup you can do where if you come up behind an enemy that can be backstabbed, and just to clarify, unlike Dark Souls where you just have to kind of walk up behind someone, hit the attack button, in Bloodborne you specifically have to do a charged heavy attack, and then it opens them up to do a finishing blow, basically. You can charge them up with a heavy backstab, and that'll stun them so you can do the finishing blow. Before you do the finishing blow, create blood bullets, which will take some of your health, but that also activates your rally. And then you can just do the finishing blow, the visceral attack, and you will get, every single time, you will get all your health back, plus those extra 5 bullets that you just got.
Nice.
It's one of the coolest, like, synergies between those different mechanics in the game, I think. Even though it's, like, really small and kind of inconsequential depending on what kind of build you're going for.
Yeah, that's a pretty good little exploit there. I'm pretty sure I may have, like, accidentally done that a few times, but I don't know. I never, unlike Blood Vials, I rarely ran out of bullets in the game because I don't typically use the weapons that use a ton of bullets, like the flame sprayer or the cannon and stuff like that. So anyway, so back to what Bloodborne does to change up the Souls formula. Well, I guess this isn't a huge change because Dark Souls 2 and 3 also did this, but there is a hub where you're going to do your leveling up and upgrading instead of at your lamps. This probably is part of the, this game wasn't super technically great when it launched on the PS4 from what I hear. So this is maybe part of that. You also can't fast travel from point to point. You have to fast travel back to the hub and then fast travel to the place where you want to go, which kind of sucks, but I feel like it was maybe a technical limitation, or maybe they're trying to make that hub feel like home, which it does. The Hunter's Dream is it's as cozy as this game is ever going to get. In the Hunter's Dream. Yeah. I really do like the Hunter's Dream and the song that plays and the weirdo NPCs that populate it. They're all very good, but you can't fast travel from one level to another level. You have to do that intermediate step, which kind of sucks. But oh well. The one thing that I do want to bring up about Bloodborne as it relates to Dark Souls in particular is that Bloodborne has a reputation for not having as much build variety compared to the Dark Souls games. And so with your stats and because Bloodborne severely limits your magic compared to Dark Souls. So I count maybe 4 or 5 main builds that you could do, just based on stats. I want to be a strength build, or I want to be an arcane build, and then there's some hybrids in there. What I think, though, is that in Bloodborne, more so than Dark Souls, whatever weapon you choose to play with, that's your build, more so than what stats you've been leveling. So I have an example here. The Tonitrus and Ludwig's Holy Blade are both strength arcane hybrid weapons, but playing with the Tonitrus and playing with the Holy Blade are incredibly different feeling, combat systems. So I think, before I kick to you guys, I think Bloodborne, of course, has less stats and less magic to play with than the Dark Souls games, but you can, I don't know, I feel like there's more expression in the combat based on what weapon you pick. So that kind of gives you different builds.
Yeah, I would agree. Even though there's fewer weapons overall than in the Dark Souls games, they're much more unique and distinct from each other. And then each one having 2 forms and everything like that. The weapons they're way more fun than in the Dark Souls games. They're what, like you said, what make that difference more so than being, in Dark Souls, a magic or a faith build or something like that. It's about the weapon that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that the reduced, variety is true compared to Dark Souls. However, I don't think that's something that's going to really show up in the moment-to-moment of an individual playthrough, especially your first time. The weapons definitely have a lot more room for expression. That I can't remember if Dave said this in here or elsewhere already, but like, your weapon is your build in a way.
Yeah.
You have many more moves. Each weapon can transform into two bespoke forms. You have a good like you have additional moves beyond like the ones you would have in Dark Souls within a single weapon. And I think that what's going on with Bloodborne is that the person who's more comfortable with an action combat system is going to find a little bit more room for variety in Bloodborne than they will in Dark Souls. Like in Dark Souls, I hear about people like, kind of mapping out these like galaxy brain build paths where it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this weapon to here, and then I'm going to level up this, and I'm going to switch to this weapon, and I'm going to dual wield this and that. And I'm just kind of like, that's not my, that doesn't, I am getting better at this, but that's not really in line with my, like, how I play these kinds of games. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sitting there and thinking about the numbers or like the numbers, for like I'm not thinking about the RPG game as strongly, the RPG expression as strongly as I'm thinking about just like the actual move set, expression.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where like, again, I do wish Bloodborne had more of that, room for build variety, because it would mean that, as I keep playing it over and over and over again, it would mean that I still have a much wider possibility space for what I can do. But like there's really like, nothing in Dark Souls. There's not a single weapon in Dark Souls that makes me feel I have anywhere close as much utility as I do with any single weapon in Bloodborne. Like you can show me like 5 or 6 different swords in Dark Souls, and there's a very big chance that like they're minimally different, if at all different, outside of like the damage type or how much damage they do, or like, 1 or 2 weapons clearly obviating the others, which is fine. That's RPGs, but it is something that Bloodborne lacks. Fewer weapons, but much wider, variety within them.
Right. And so I say there's less build variety. There's a reputation of having less build variety. I actually don't care because I'm not a build person. Games that have infinite build variety actually stress me out. So like Divinity Original Sin 2 was like a major, like at the beginning, I was very overwhelmed by the builds to do. Or like when I start a new Dark Souls file, I'm like, oh shit, there's like 20 different possibilities. What should I do? And sometimes I'll even ask other people to like tell me, hey, what's a cool thing to do here? In Bloodborne, there's less of that, though. Like even if you are a build person, you're gonna have to play this game at least 3 times before you run out of new stuff to do or new weapons. And I'm glad you brought up that people are kind of mapping out like different weapons to use at different portions of the playthrough. You can definitely do that in Bloodborne, but one thing I think is pretty unique, aside from a few Dark Souls weapons, your starting weapons in Bloodborne can take you through the entire game. In fact, I think the saw cleaver is the best weapon in the game, in my opinion, and that's one of your starting weapons. So like if you're a huge build variety person and you're going to play this game 10 times, you're going to run out of new things to do, maybe. But like for the average player, I don't think they're ever going to run out of possibilities,
Yeah.
So another thing that Bloodborne has changed is Bloodborne has added in this stat called Insight, which is, like Moon said, his Discord notification sound. Insight is kind of a quote replacement for humanity as it was in Dark Souls. It doesn't work the same way, but Insight, since Bloodborne has this Lovecraftian kind of theming to it, and like straight up Lovecraftian things later in the game, Insight is a kind of Lovecraftian idea. It's a stat that accumulates as you see new bosses go to new areas and stuff like that. And it's kind of just it's just kind of like a stat that represents like how much of the real shit you've seen, and by extension like how you see the things that are really there that other people cannot see in that like cosmic horror sort of way. And it It has some effects on the gameplay itself. I'll let one of you guys explain if you can explain what it actually does, because I'm not super clear on it. But it is a second currency also that you can use to buy things at a special merchant in the Hunter's Dream. So insight is cool. You start out with 0. Once you get 1, some things in the game change. And then once you get to another threshold later in the game, things will really, in a big, magnificent way, start to change visually. So that's kind of cool, although you can just play the game and just pretty much ignore insight, like you can play Dark Souls and basically ignore humanity.
Jake, do you want to explain it, or do you want me to explain it?
You can go for it.
Okay, so the way insight works is, you have a counter. Like Dave said, you gain insight for making discoveries. And the way the game defines discoveries, it is generally meeting bosses for the first time, beating said bosses, discovering new areas, and then beyond that, it's just kind of like at the whims of what the developer considers like an arcane discovery, basically. Like there are certain like in-game like events and quests where it's not really consistent in any way, but there'll be a story beat that's like, oh yeah, that's especially Lovecraftian, that's especially Eldritch, and you'll get, insight for happening upon it. And like, so like just, discoveries is, I guess, the key word for what causes it to go up. As for what it does, this is actually kind of a disappointment I have with the system in the game, is that it feels like the promise of what it does is greater than what it actually accomplishes for how it affects what you see. Because there are basically 2 levels of what you can see. Once you hit 15 insights, you start to see certain things. Like certain enemies will get additional effects on their attacks, like, not going to get into the spoilers of it all, but like, for example, there might be an enemy holding a lantern, and when you get to 15 insight, that lantern will actually be covered in eyeballs and have an additional attack, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's in the Hunter's Dream, there's certain dialogue that will be more likely that has a small chance of happening only if your insight is high enough. After 15, I believe the only insight tier is 40. And 40 insight, basically, there's a certain thing that happens in, I guess, after Act 2 of the game, where you're kind of like able to see certain things in the world. And 40 insight simply allows you to see that stuff sooner.
Yeah.
Which, even as a first-time player, that's disappointing, because at least for me, as a first-time player who didn't really know anything, like, I wasn't just keeping all my insight. To me, that was money. I was spending it on, whatever I could buy at the Bath Messengers in the Dream. The only real effect beyond that is involving a certain mechanic called Frenzy. Should I explain that now, Dave, or are we going to wait on that?
Yeah, we can explain Frenzy. Frenzy is one of the worst status effects I've ever come across in a game in the FromSoft tradition of curse being fucking horrible in every game. And what is it? Terror in Sekiro being fucking horror.
Terror is
fucking
worse,
terrible.
by the way.
that one was awful because it would just straight up kill you in one hit. Yeah, go ahead and explain what Frenzy is.
Okay, so Frenzy is kind of like a representation of madness, I believe.
Yeah.
The idea is that there are certain, attacks. There are certain attacks enemies can do that increase frenzy damage. And Frenzy, like so many other status effects in Bloodborne and other, Soulsborne games, there's a bar that fills up, and when it gets to the top, it'll trigger whatever special effect it has on you. What Frenzy does is it robs you of, I believe, it is a percentage level. I believe it is 85% of your health bar, something to that effect. So like you have to be like you have to be close or pretty close to full, basically, if you want to survive a hit of Frenzy. And what'll cause that is like, it's kind of themed. So it's like kind of like, certain attacks will be like, oh yeah, you'll see an enemy that has like a big brain, and they can literally just do psychic damage to you and shoot little spears into you, and that increases, your frenzy bar. The way insight ties into this is that the higher your insight is, the lower your frenzy resistance is.
Yeah.
So, if you go in with like 99 insight against a brain enemy, good fucking night.
Your frenzy's
you're not doing
done.
That's why you want to spend your insight, basically. Like, even beyond the cool things you can get for spending it. Like, that's why you want to spend it. That's why, if you're not particularly into the cool things you see, which again, like, kind of becomes obviated like halfway through the game, basically halfway to 2/3 through the game, you're going to want to keep your insight low because frenzy will build up much faster if you have insight. And a couple other things regarding that is insight also affects beasthood. Beasthood is another mechanic maybe we can talk about, but the lower your insight, the easier it is to build up beasthood for extra damage. Yeah, I feel like there's one more thing I'm forgetting. I can't remember what it is. Oh yeah, that's right. The most important part. This is why these two guys hate it so much. Understandably, I think, even though I'm softer on Frenzy than a lot of people, is that Frenzy doesn't. A lot of the enemies that cause Frenzy, like, do so with like line of sight, basically. Because like there are a number of enemies that do Frenzy, and it's not many enemies that do Frenzy damage, to be clear, but the ones that do, like there's something like 3 or 4 enemies. There's like maybe 2 or 3 enemies that consistently do Frenzy type attacks. And like 2 of those 3 are literally just line of sight. If they see you, your Frenzy bar starts to fill up.
Which, like, thematically, that's really cool. Like, the idea that just seeing this enemy is causing you to lose your fucking mind. Yeah, it hurts you. But in practice, not
it's
great.
It's such a pain.
It's a pain.
and because it doesn't stop. Frenzy doesn't like cause, and I guess I shouldn't say just line of sight, because it happens with Frenzy attacks that aren't line of sight too, but Frenzy doesn't just stop once it hits you. Like, it will continue to build up, and that's where insight comes into play. If I see a brain enemy and it gets line of sight on me for a second, and I hide behind a wall, because there are those mechanics. There is a cover mechanic in certain areas. It will continue to build up, and if you have high insight, I swear to you, I have had scenarios where I was seen for a few seconds by a brain, and my insight just built up to max from 0, basically, because my insight was too high.
Or, like, what really sucks is when you see one of those enemies, your Frenzy's building, you kill it, you're like, I won! Frenzy finishes building, you die.
Yeah. And, like, it is, and, like, to be clear, like, it is pretty easy to tank Frenzy if you need to, like, if you have like a reasonable amount of blood vials. However, because of the way these enemies work, if you haven't like already killed them, like, you're just kind of stuck in a death loop, because once Frenzy builds up, there's no grace period, there's no cooldown. If you're still in the presence of something that causes Frenzy, it will just instantly start going back up. The one consumable that you have that negates that, called the sedative. Is you can't carry enough of it at the same time, or it just usually doesn't make sense to use that instead of a blood vial, especially if you're talking about like taking your PS4 controller and just like desperately fumbling to get to where the sedative is. Like, it's just not worth it. I think it's a super cool mechanic. I don't hate it as much as some people do, simply because like it's much less a part of the game than it sounds on paper, but it does have some, I think it's fair to say, some objectively ill-considered elements to it mechanically.
Well, yeah, we have spent kind of a disproportionate amount of time on the podcast talking about Frenzy for the amount of times in the game where it's going to come up.
It's true.
It is a giant pain in the ass, in my opinion, and it just carries on the tradition of FromSoftware having one status effect that just fucking sucks. Like, maybe it's a cool idea, but in practice, like, the game is already hard enough. We don't really need this, in my opinion. But anyway, so that's insight. I remember being on a stream, I think Moon, you were in the chat, and I kept getting just destroyed by Frenzy, and it was either you or someone else in the chat that was like, hey dude, you have like 75 insight, go spend that shit. and you'll be okay. And I was like, oh right, yeah, there's a connection there for sure.
Yeah, I think that might have been me. It could be wrong. If you are the other person and it was actually you, I am so sorry. Please don't dox me or hunt me down.
So the other thing, real quick, and not to spend a ton of time on this, because this is part of the FromSoftware like DNA. There are NPCs that you'll meet throughout the game that have little side quests attached to them. In Bloodborne, there's not as many, I don't think. There's only a few that I can think of. But in FromSoftware tradition, these are incredibly hard to see through to the end. Even at the easiest, all you have to do is find these people in the random ass spots where they are throughout the side quest, which is, I mean, I think that's really hard, because like they'll go to levels that you've already cleared out before. So if you're not like going back through all the levels all the time, you're going to miss some of these side quests. The NPCs can die during side quests, as they always can. So like there's a couple, there's one in particular, Alfred, who, like, just saying his name's not a spoiler, but I can see Alfred's quest through to the end because there's no way for him to die during his quest. But there's another one in particular that I have never, ever been able to get through to the very end. So just like the other Souls games, the NPC quests are obtuse and they are hard to see through to the end. And the rewards for doing so are, I mean, if you're really, really into story stuff, sure. But like mechanical rewards and like actual, you know, tangible rewards for it, not great in my opinion. So like, don't feel bad if you're doing this and you see one of your NPCs and then they just die, or like you see them and then you never see them again, which will happen, I think. Don't feel bad. They're cool, but they're not like, I don't know, none really as cool as like Sigmire or something like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's some good ones, but yeah, they're difficult for sure. I always try to do them because I feel weird if I don't, which is that's just me. Because I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm not going to get anything, but I have to. Yeah,
I mean, I'll send Eileen on her quest, but then I'll forget to do something at the right time, and then I'll come back and she's dead or something like that.
You know? Missed it.
Yeah, I will say that I think I don't personally find like the character stories of the side quests like less compelling than Dark Souls. I actually really do like some of those characters and how you interact with them. However, there's kind of a combination of the side quests being too simplistic and or being too short. Like, you know, like for example, like, you know, not going to get into spoilers, but there's a character who I guess you could say, you know, she's kind of like your Solaire character in a way. Like, you know, she's the buddy that you meet early in the game. And whereas like Solaire, like you meet him upwards of 4 or 5 times throughout the game. And then you can either, you know, see his story end the way it naturally does. You're already crying, you know what I'm talking about. Or, you know, you can end it the other way. Whereas with Bloodborne, with this character in particular, you meet her exactly 3 times. There are like 2 major events to her story. And if you fuck it up, it's like, it's not particularly compelling what happens. Like, you know, I let her die during this fight because, you know, my weapon swings literally kept cutting through her when I was trying to fight the other guy. Or, I guess I just forgot to find her in this random place, so now I've
forgot to go talk to her before beating this boss.
Yeah, it's over. Yeah, it's like, it's kind of like, it's both arbitrary and just too simplistic to really like feel compelling. Like, I feel like there would be more. Well, I said I don't think it's less compelling, but like they're too short to really feel like big deals in a way they should be. Like, I constantly feel like, man, I wish there was more to this. Like, I wish there was more to this person's character. I wish I could learn more about them. Like,
yeah, so the NPCs are like, they're there. There's a few of them. The stories are fine. I mean, it's Bloodborne, so like the flavor of it is usually really good. I mean, I mentioned Alfred. If you can see his quest line to the end, because it's very memorable, I'll say, with no spoilers. But anyway, I just don't think there's anything as memorable, or like no characters that are as colorful and memorable as Solaire or Sigmire or something like that. So We are going to take a music break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the combat in Bloodborne. All right, and time to talk about the combat in Bloodborne, which is, in my opinion, the star of the show, the combat. And frankly, it's besides exploring, it's what you're doing through most of the game. So we already talked about the regain/rally system. When we say those words, we mean the same thing. We already talked about the weapons, how each weapon has different forms, but we can kind of elaborate on that. So I guess there's two main things in the combat that differentiate this from even Dark Souls 3, which feels pretty similar depending on your playstyle to Bloodborne. Each weapon has two forms, and so I use the saw cleaver, which is it's a big old saw with a big old handle on it. And so, for example, if you press, I think it's L1, right, on the PS4 controller,
Yes.
you will switch weapon forms and you'll kind of extend the saw into a longer handle with a bigger reach. Basically, you'll have a second form with a bigger reach, so you can do a little bit more crowd control with this other one. And the other thing that's cool about this is that by doing this in the middle of a combo, there are special attacks. So you can hit your R1, L1, and you'll do what's called a transformation attack. And most weapons have these. And I don't use these a ton, but I find them to be a good way to sneak in an extra hit that maybe I don't have the stamina for another like full hit with the regular R1 or R2s. But if you watch someone like Suni Legend on Twitter, who is like a fucking professional at these kind of games, you will see them like pepper these in, and you're not bouncing enemies up in the air like Devil May Cry or something, but it really unlocks this like extra level of expression and complexity to the melee combat that Dark Souls games don't. Dark Souls games are not trying to do this. Bloodborne specifically added this in and then removed it for Dark Souls 3, which came out later. So this is one of the other things that kind of differentiates this. The other thing is that you have a gun instead of a shield. And so in Bloodborne, you can pick up a shield, but it's a joke, and the game gives it to you just so like if you're a Dark Souls player coming in, you're like, finally, I found a shield, and you can't do shit with the shield. You'll learn that very quickly. So Bloodborne is a more dodging-based game, and then you have a gun, but your gun is not used for damage unless you specifically build for that. Your gun is used for parrying. So I said this on the Dark Souls episode, but I can't parry in Dark Souls. I find it basically impossible, except for Gwyn. But in Bloodborne, they extended the parry window like way bigger than it feels in Dark Souls. So when the enemy is winding up to hit you, you shoot your gun, you'll get a parry, you can run in for this critical attack with this absolutely brutal animation, depending on the enemy. I'm thinking of the pigs right now, the visceral attack on the pigs. You can't parry every enemy, but like Moon said earlier, you can get that critical attack by surprising them with a charged R2 heavy attack also. So those three things, okay? So the weapon forms, transformation attacks, dodging-based combat instead of blocking, and parrying with guns makes the Bloodborne combat feel very, very different from Souls games, while also maintaining the same kind of thing. You need to be methodical. You need to study the enemies. You need to learn their attacks and stuff like that. So I'll turn it over to you guys. I really, really, really love the combat in Bloodborne, even if I don't get into the transformation attacks so much. I'll turn it over to you guys. What do you guys think?
I absolutely agree that I love it. And another thing that adds to the increase in speed is the fact that your dodge in Dark Souls, it's a roll. And, there's lots of really funny memes and comics about rolling around to get away from blows in the middle of combat.
Combat rolling.
Yeah. In Bloodborne, it's just a slide. You stay on your feet, you basically shift to the side really fast, so you're never going down, you don't have to get back up, you just shift, and then every weapon has a dodge attack as well, which you shift, and if you attack at the right time, you lunge in with a really fast attack. So again, it just keeps it all faster. Another reason that people use the transformational attacks all the time is they have a higher damage multiplier than a regular attack. So like, different attacks have different damage multipliers. It's like, oh, this quick attack is 0.85 of a full, 100% damage. It's 85, and this one is 1.05. And then the transformational attacks will be like 1.35. It does 30% more damage than a regular hit, which is no joke. So if you learn to get those in, not only do you have more variety of moves to play with, you're just plain doing more damage as well.
Yeah, good thing with that dodge, real quick, you have 2 dodges in Bloodborne. If you're locked on, you'll do this like kind of hop step, which is a real quick dodge. And if you're... remind me, because it's different in every game. If you're locked on, if you double tap dodge, do you do the dodge roll?
You do, I think you do, right? You like do your quick slide and then a bigger away.
I think Bloodborne, it's still the quick step if you're locked on, even if you double. I'm pretty sure.
And then if you're not locked on, you do the big, long dodge roll.
Yeah, you do the Dark Souls dodge roll if you're not locked on.
Yeah, that's it.
I should say, for those of you who, for whatever reason, have played Dark Souls and haven't played Bloodborne but are listening to this, the backstep that you do by pressing dodge without holding a direction or anything in Dark Souls, the quick step is basically like that, but it's for every direction. And it's faster and longer, and there's more iframes, I'm pretty sure, etc. I guess to add on to what y'all said about the combat so far is that it depends on weapon to weapon, but it is viable to just make an entire combo of chaining transformation attacks. Like, basically, I think Dave already mentioned that if you hit the transformation button right after hitting the attack button before the animation is done, you'll do a transformation attack. You can also trigger a transformation attack by dodging and then hitting the transformation button. And, so whatever method you choose, whether you're starting with a light attack or you're starting with a dodge, you can just chain transformation attacks over and over and over again if you want until you run out. And it's kind of I got to be careful with my words here because I have a friend who's very into fighting games. He'll be mad if I get this wrong, but my not playing fighting games, my understanding is that a lot of them do have the kind of like 3 tiers of like light attacks, medium attacks, and heavy attacks. Transformation attacks are kind of like the secret, somewhat hidden like medium attack between the lights and the heavies. Like, they take more stamina. At least in my experience, the weapons I've used, believe it or not, I've still not used all the weapons in this game. But despite having played it so many times, but like they take more stamina than light attacks, but they take less stamina than heavy attacks. And I don't know if like I know Jake already mentioned the damage multipliers. Like that's kind of where my brain like just turns off. I don't even notice that number stuff, honestly, even though that is useful. I probably should pay attention to it. All I know is that when I use a whole bunch of transformation attacks, it certainly feels better than like, any other like combo spam, basically. Like, and it's very easy to do when you have stuff like the saw cleaver, where it is literally just, oh, what if my saw was a longer saw, basically,
Right.
So
yeah. And so a lot of weapons will do that. Like the transformations will extend it into a longer weapon. The axe does that too. The saw spear does that, but a lot of them will literally transform it into something. So like there's one weapon where the regular form is a sword, but the transformation is a big ass hammer. Or The Tonitrus, like if you hit the transformation thing, it will electrify the Tonitrus and do extra electric damage and stuff like that. So like not all of the transformations do just, short weapon, long weapon, stuff like that. You do need to experiment with all of the weapons. And this plays into that idea that your weapon has so many capabilities by itself that it becomes your build, basically. You need to get the stats for the weapon, but the weapon that you have, you get very, very familiar with its whole moveset, which is a lot more varied than a Dark Souls game.
Yeah, some of the weapons, become two-handed, so you no longer have your pistol available anymore.
Right.
Some of the weapons completely change what stat they scale with.
Yep.
The Chikage, in its regular form, is a one-handed katana that uses skill.
Yeah.
And then when you transform it, it's now two-handed, so lose the pistol, plus it only scales off Blood Tinge, which is one of the more rare, harder to use stats to build towards. It can be really, really good. It actually makes your guns become viable damage dealing, like Dave said, where unless you build a certain way, the guns are only for parrying. Mm-hmm. Blood Tinge is when they're not. But yeah, you have a weapon that completely changes when you switch it. So that one, if you're only building towards, say, skill, you would never want to use it in its second form because you're not built towards that. You're going to suddenly lose damage.
Right. Do you guys agree with me that the parrying in Bloodborne is easier? Like, would you say the parrying is easy for the average player who's playing it? Because I don't think parrying in Dark Souls is easy for the average player. I think that's an advanced player thing, parrying in Dark Souls.
Okay, my take on parrying for Bloodborne, I do agree with you. It feels more natural to me. Bloodborne, the stun with your gun. I would say that I think the difference that makes it more intuitive is that it is purely based on the kind of like same metric for every gun, which is that you want to fire at the enemy as late into their attack animation as possible, basically. Like, it's like, once your enemy's already lunged at you, and Bloodborne, because it's on PS4 as opposed to, Xbox 360 and PS3 like Dark Souls is, like, there is a lot more detail, like, to the animations, where like, when the characters lunge at you, like if you compare like the hollows in Dark Souls 1, where like they'll kind of lunge at you and they'll just be almost like puppets that kind of got picked up and like leap at you, like, Bloodborne, the characters will kind of like rear back and then, reach forward with their arms, etc. You can see that more, but also because the idea is you want to parry as late into the attack as possible. It's, to my understanding, different from Dark Souls, where it's like, oh, there's a specific window for each attack where you have to parry, and you have to like hit it when like when the enemy's sword is at this point compared to you. Whereas in Bloodborne, it's just just do it as close. Just pull the trigger like as close to being hit as possible. And you are playing chicken basically, and you want to jump out at the you want to fire at the last possible. Depending on your gun, because different guns do have different firing rates, but like you want to fire as close to being hit as you can get away with. And even if you get hit, sometimes you will have done it early enough to basically kind of do a trade where like you'll take damage, but you'll also stun them. And if you recover from the hit fast enough, depending on what the attack was, you can still get that visceral in and maybe even recover that damage you took.
Right.
Yeah. I think the big difference with Dark Souls with the shields is with, like we said, with Bloodborne, with the gun, you just hit the button, you pull the trigger, you're shooting. For the most part. Some are a little slower, but it's pretty quick. In Dark Souls, you have to take into account not only the attack and where the enemy's weapon is and when it's going to hit you, but what shield you're using and how fast you swing it, and at what point in the shield swing you need it to connect with their weapon for it to count as a parry. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot more going on.
Yeah, that's true. You have two animation windows that you have to line up.
Because some of the shields have a bigger window,
right?
But they don't block as much if you mess it up. And others have a much smaller window, but if you mess it up, you're still getting an okay block in. In Bloodborne, it's just you pull the trigger and you shoot them. That's it. Yeah. That's all you're worrying about.
Yeah.
And so, kind of taking this combat and like, you'll get trained on this. There's some enemies in the first level that are like specifically designed to teach you how to parry. Those big brick trolls are very easy to parry, and they have these big wind-ups. They're almost begging you to do it.
There's a hidden tutorial area for that too, almost. Like when you first go into Central Yarnum and you get to where that big gate is, there's that
behind
hidden
the carriage.
corner. Yeah, that hidden corner with like the brick troll, and like you don't get anything good for beating them, but they are there and they are isolated. It is specifically to teach you dodge and parry timings. At least that's how I feel seeing it, where it's like, oh yeah, this is literally just here like to give me kind of like a makeshift tutorial room without actually having like a pause screen tutorial room like Bayonetta or whatever, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The other thing about the parries is that a lot of the bosses can be parried, and this is how I'm going to transition into talking about bosses, because that is, well, it's like one half of the combat here in these games is you learn the combat by fighting all these enemies in the levels, but sooner or later you're going to come up against the big bad bosses. And I think in Bloodborne that the bosses are at a very high batting average, I think, compared to, not that the bosses in Dark Souls 1 are bad, but some of them are bad and some of them are pretty average. I really enjoy the bosses in Bloodborne. Some I enjoy like mechanically and like learning how to fight them, but all of them have very cool designs, at least. Some of them have very cool backstories and stuff like that. So like if you have a boss in Bloodborne that's like very average mechanically or like fun factor wise, they at least look really fucking cool. There's a big mix of like human or humanoid enemies, big beasts to fight, and then later in the game you get into some real eldritch monstrosity type things that you're fighting. So what do you guys think? This is, I mean, it's a big question, but just like maybe comparing to others in the series, or like, I don't think it's a stretch to say that compared to most video games, the bosses in Bloodborne are very, very good.
Yeah, Bloodborne bosses, like the thing about them, like you mentioned the parry, thing with them. You can't parry every boss, but in retrospect, it's one of those things where, like, it is kind of obvious which ones you can parry, because there are a number of humanoid bosses, that you meet throughout the game that you can, parry. But aside from that, like, you're not really parrying them. And that's one thing I think that they did improve in some of their future games, like, Sekiro, where it's like, oh yeah, literally everything is parryable. As far as the bosses, like, designs themselves, they're fantastic designs. I think Bloodborne probably by volume has like the most like bosses that I really love in the series, basically. There's some gorgeous effects to them that can really, like, they can sometimes get in the way, especially with how like lovingly and like luxuriously they're animated, basically, like, especially because the frame rate of the game isn't, especially nowadays, it's not quite up with where a lot of the other Souls games can run on modern hardware. But
yeah, they still haven't updated. Well, actually, people are up in arms that they haven't updated Bloodborne for the PS5. They haven't updated. FromSoftware hasn't updated any of their games for the PS5, as far as I know. Or
Dark Souls 3, they did.
Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro both run at 60 on PS5, to my understanding.
Okay.
Yes, they did.
But like,
or Xbox Series X. I don't remember which. But
Dark Souls 1 remastered and Dark Souls 2 Scholar for Sin already ran at 60.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they were older and...
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing, is that Bloodborne is the only one that doesn't run at 60.
Okay.
All the others do.
Yeah, at least in terms of
at least
whatever the most modern hardware is.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had down here that, like, part of the thing that makes some of these bosses hard is there's a lot of effects. Like, a lot of the bosses have like torn cloth flying around, or like hair,
or torn skin.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. And so
flying around.
some of the bosses, like I noticed this in the Cleric Beast, which is for many people the first boss they're going to fight, that the frame rate kind of does tank during some of these boss fights, even when I played on PS5 recently. So, I mean, not like tank, not like, 10 frames per second, but it definitely does slow down for sure.
And they did improve it after launch too. Like there were some real like choke points that from what I hear, because I didn't play it till long after that, but there were some choke points that did get improved with updates, along with those load times, which were apparently like literally a minute long at launch.
I was just
like
gonna
a blank
say,
screen. They didn't even have the text on
Yeah,
them.
it didn't even have lore. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, if you listen to podcasts about Bloodborne that came out like right after the game was released, everyone was like, you have to wait like a full minute every time you die to get back. But it's not like that anymore. And that was one thing I did notice on the PS5, that the load times were like real short.
Yeah, PS4 Pro increased it too, because I remember on the original PS4, like a typical loading screen for me was something like 30 seconds long. And then on my recent replay, I was like, you know what? I wonder if the PS4 Pro with boost mode improves this at all. And like my average loading screen, like it depended, but it was usually like 10 to 15 seconds, which that feels long now, but it is still much better. Yeah.
Just sounds like there's a jet engine in your room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The PS4 Pro was loud.
So back on the subject of bosses, there will be a special episode of Tales from the Backlog later this week, where I am joined by some guests to do tier rankings of the bosses in Bloodborne, just like we did for the Dark Souls episode, and I feel like will be a continuing theme when we cover games on the show that have lots and lots of great boss fights. So stay tuned for that episode coming out later this week. But the bosses in Bloodborne, in the spoilers section of this episode, we'll be giving our top 3 bosses. So stick around for that if you have already played the game or if you don't care about spoilers. So the other thing that I want to highlight in Bloodborne is the level design, which I feel like Bloodborne is the last game in the FromSoftware catalog that really, really focused on you get one checkpoint in each level, or maybe 2, and then you have all these looping shortcuts back to that same checkpoint, and you get that incredible feeling of like, you're like, I am running low on healing, I'm running low on other consumables, I'm running low on bullets, or like, I'm just having a hard time, I really need to rest, but that last lamp was so long ago. Then you're exploring around, you find a door, you open it up, and it's an elevator that takes you back to your original lamp, which is something that a lot of people loved in Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 2 kind of, I don't want to say abandoned that totally, but it's not a huge point of emphasis. And then Dark Souls 3, they moved even further away from that, in my opinion.
Except for like one level.
Yeah, they every now and then they're like, hey, let's do that thing we used to do.
Like Cathedral of the Deep in Dark Souls 3 does that extensively and amazingly,
and it's
like the only place that does.
And it's one of the best levels in Dark Souls 3, but Bloodborne really focuses on that for most of the levels, and so
it's the closest you get to the interconnected world of Dark Souls 1 out of any of their games. I think it's not as interconnected as Dark Souls 1, but it's the closest.
Yeah, I guess if we want to talk about that, since you brought it up, is that one thing I find interesting about Bloodborne is that like the progression of the main story is like, it is tight-fistedly linear. Like, you do things in a very specific sequence, and it's, you are basically climbing up straight up the main log of the tree, and any branch you go onto is just going to be like side content of a dead end of some kind, right? You're not necessarily, that's not to say that the world is a straight line. The world is not a straight line, but the way you go through it is one very specific direction. However, the world design itself is still somewhat labyrinthian, and one interesting thing I noticed compared to Dark Souls is that whereas Dark Souls, I mean, after the Undead Asylum, obviously, like you start from Firelink Shrine, and Firelink Shrine is kind of like at the top and directly like in the middle of the spider web, so to speak, right? Like, you can go like in any given direction, go to areas that each all lead to multiple areas, right? So like, whereas in Bloodborne, I feel that like Cathedral Ward, that is like the equivalent of Firelink Shrine, but you're not starting from there. You're kind of starting from like the edge of a spoke in Central Yharnam. Like Central Yharnam technically has like one area that loops back into it, but it is more or less like a dead end compared to like when you get, you know, through Central Yharnam into Cathedral Ward. Like that Cathedral Ward is kind of like the middle area that like leads in like 3 or 4 different directions. And on top of that, like your equivalent of I know we called the Hunter's Dream the cozy place earlier, and it is, but your equivalent of the place where the NPCs you meet gather is in Cathedral Ward. Like, you know, like Cathedral Ward is treated like Firelink Shrine much more than the Hunter's Dream is. You know, which is like, so it's weird. It's like Bloodborne, because, you know, especially as Miyazaki, my understanding is that he started working on Bloodborne as soon as he was done with Dark Souls 1. Like, you can literally find like an early version of one of Bloodborne's maps in Dark Souls 1's code. I remember reading. In fact, it might have been Cathedral Ward, I'm pretty sure. And, you know, you can kind of tell that he's still kind of operating on those similar world design philosophies, even if, like, the progression philosophy in Bloodborne is much more linear.
Yeah. There's also that kind of thing that people have pointed out where the first boss that you fight in Bloodborne is basically the last boss of the Dark Souls 1 DLC. Or at least they look the same, and they're very similar. I don't think it's as... I don't think the Cleric Beast is... Yeah. I don't think the Cleric Beast is as bullshit a fight as the Manus fight is, but
agreed.
Anyway, there is some direct carryover, at least in the way they're thinking. So yeah, just wanted to highlight, like, if you played Dark Souls 1 and you really love how the levels loop back on each other and how it's designed from, like, you have your one lamp, which is your bonfire type thing in this game. You have your one thing, and then you're going to open up 2 or 3 shortcuts back to it as you progress through the level. There are a couple levels that don't quite do that, but I think most of them do. And then in the DLC, I'm thinking of a couple in particular that are just incredible with the way that you'll find an elevator and suddenly you're back at your lamp and you're like, holy shit, this is great. This feels so great, because some of these levels do get really, really hard.
Oh, yes, they do.
The design of, like, the levels too, like we talk about in the Dark Souls episode, how great it feels to explore those games. Bloodborne is the same way. I think FromSoftware has absolutely nailed exploration, like making exploring the level, every single nook and cranny, worth your time. You will probably find an item that's cool. Maybe you'll find a weapon. Maybe you'll find an NPC. Maybe you'll just find an enemy that is very weird. It's just always good. I just get this, like, incredible compulsion to explore everywhere in these FromSoft games, and Bloodborne is absolutely the same way.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people do. You know, I have heard, you know, quite a bit of complaint about, like, the clutter in Bloodborne, right? Like the visual clutter, like, kind of like, oh yeah, I walk into a room and there's a bunch of pots and there's a bunch of books in the corner. You know, there's a bunch of, like,
45 coffins.
Yeah. Like there's a bunch of, like, skulls, like, you know, basically sprouting out of the ground, that kind of stuff. And it's like, I don't know, man. To me, that's just more like visual data to look at, because, like, if you look at most of it seems to have some kind of, like, intentionality, even if a lot of it is still kind of vague, you know? Like, you know, I don't know if you or anyone listening has heard of Jerk Sans Frontiers, which is an old Bloodborne channel that isn't around anymore, but it was just like 9 very long episodes of walking around with a binocular and, like, examining every texture and every enemy. Like, oh yeah, this enemy has, like, these what looks like whip markings on its back, which could show that maybe they were a slave race, but there are also some on their front, so that actually wouldn't make sense. You know, just all this, like, you know, really cool sense of detail that's, like, just injected into my veins like a blood vial. Like, holy fuck, it's really good stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people complain about the clutter, and I 100% do not understand. Like, people are saying, are those people saying that they want these levels to have less detail and less care put into the way that they look? Like,
they must be Dark Souls 2 fans.
Well, they want effective use of negative space.
Yeah.
But Bloodborne is not literally just full of stuff that's crashing and flying around everywhere you go. Like, if you go into a building, there should be stuff in there if you're going in someone's house or something like that. Or if you're...
Well, I would say imagine the feeling in like a Western walking into a ghost town where there's literally nothing. There's no trash, there's no people. That feeling of emptiness is a very distinct feeling that Bloodborne doesn't have anywhere, because it's stuff everywhere. It's more chaotic, which maybe they weren't going for that feeling, but I understand what they're saying. The clutter is the opposite of that, so you never get that feeling of emptiness and negative space that you can in some of the other games, especially because part of it is the console generations. It was the first time they went to PS4, they had more horsepower to play with, and they let loose.
Well, that's true, but the other thing to mention that, and this is the one that really puts me on Dave's side of, oh yeah, I don't understand this, is that, like, replaying Dark Souls 1 does that too. Like, it doesn't do it as much because, you know, like Jake just said, like, you know, they didn't have the horsepower of the next generation of consoles, but Dark Souls 1 had that same design philosophy. You walk into rooms and they're just full of stuff. Like, you know, just stuff to, like, make these places, like, feel lived in or feel travel or feel well worn, you know, etc. Like, you know, like among all the games that from all the Soulsborne games, Dark Souls 2 feels like the anomaly with that, and that was kind of because, to my understanding, there was, like, some development trouble where they had to, like, apparently reconsider a lot of, like, the graphical design and detail, etc. when they were making that game.
Yeah, I definitely understand the, like, you know, you want to have negative space, but, like, I don't know. Bloodborne is not, you're not exploring the long abandoned ruins of, you know, a civilization here. There's still people living in the city. So it makes sense that there's all this stuff around. And I mean, just the streets lined with coffins that are chained shut really adds a lot to the atmosphere, even if it's just, you know, set dressing and stuff like that. So I really enjoy it.
The first time you notice that they're chained shut is kind of like what is going on here? Why are they chaining their coffin shut? And then the entire game, you're waiting for something to jump out of a coffin at you.
Yeah. I recently recorded an episode about Kingsfield 4, which will, by the time you hear this, it will be out. But, like, in that game, we talked about how it's cool that it's a PS2 game, so they had to do it this way, but everything's empty in that because you are exploring the ruins of a long, long abandoned civilization in that game. And Bloodborne's not the same way, so it makes sense for it to be cluttered with people's things and furniture and stuff like that. So, yeah. Moving on into kind of like wrapping up some of the other features of Bloodborne, we're going to take a short music break, and then we will finish these up. In Bloodborne, there are a couple of other things to note. The first one is that Bloodborne features something that's unique in the FromSoftware catalog, as far as I know, which are called Chalice dungeons in Bloodborne. They are procedurally generated, except for a handful, maybe, 10 or so that are fully bespoke. But even when I say they're bespoke, they're not designed with the same level design sensibilities that the real levels are. They just mean that they are laid out in a non-procedurally generated way. Some of them all of them have lore implications, but the existence of them has lore implications. Some of them have unique bosses, and the reason that they're there is that, well, some of them you have to do to get 100% completion and get that platinum trophy. And the procedurally generated ones are there for basically to give you endless content, but it's also a place you can go and farm upgrade materials or find rare variations of weapons and stuff like that. So these are accessed through the hub. You have to use special items to open them up. You'll find those items as rewards for beating bosses in the main game. And then once you beat one, you'll get an item that lets you open up the next bespoke one and stuff like that. So I do not want to spend a whole lot of time talking about Chalice Dungeons on here. I think that they are cool thematically, and they're pretty bad in practice. They start out fun. I start out every Bloodborne playthrough with the idea that, like, I'm going to get through all the bespoke ones. I'm going to get the platinum trophy, beat all the bosses. And then I get so tired of them. They all look the same. They all have mostly the same enemies. And some of the later ones introduce challenges that frankly don't sound fun. And so not my jam. What do you guys think?
So, I did go through the bespoke Chalice dungeons to fight the unique boss at the end. There is a unique story boss that you can only fight in the Chalice dungeons. There are a number of bosses and enemies that are exclusive to Chalice dungeons. It's hard to say how many of them were like cut due to quality or like were designed for Chalice dungeons from the get-go, etc. I think I agree with Dave that the Chalice dungeons are overall bad, but I mean bad like on the scale of like the rest of the game being incredibly good. Like right. I still would choose the combat experience of Chalice dungeons over a lot of other action games just on that pure mechanical level. But it feels like you're meant to kind of experience Chalice dungeons across new games and New Game Plus, because you don't... your progress in Chalice dungeons doesn't reset, unlike, the main game, when you go into New Game Plus. So, like, you keep all your progress, and you're kind of, meant to go across multiple New Game Pluses. Of course, you could be stubborn like me and insist on doing it all in New Game, which is, what I eventually did after avoiding Chalice dungeons for so long, But yeah, not much else to say. If you really want just like kind of like the quote, the more game experience with Bloodborne, like Chalice dungeons can be fun, especially in multiplayer. I think they're a great, I feel like they would, and you can say this about so many things, but I feel like they really do get elevated if you're playing with friends, just for the sake of farming, etc. So I think I'm happy they're there in the end regardless, but they're definitely not ideal. And I wish they would try the concept one more time, because I feel like 2022 roguelike and proc gen like developer knowledge and technology would make it so much better. Because like you look at like Dead Cells, like, which came out like what? They came out 2018, right? That it has the same concept with like the kind of like slotted puzzle piece level design with like enemies scattered throughout, and it's fantastic. Like, so like it can be done. I just don't think they did it with Bloodborne.
Yeah, I wouldn't have too much else to say. Cool idea. I like how it fits in lore-wise, but they do get old fast. And I'm definitely in the same boat, though, where I've been going, take another swing at it. Like, I want to see them iterate on this idea. Like, I was hoping that, like, they would introduce a DLC for Dark Souls 3 that would be another take at the idea. I was really hoping for that. And they haven't. They just, like, completely abandoned that idea, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a real shame. Makes me wonder how much of that was a Japan studio idea versus a FromSoft idea, since they helped develop the game.
Possible.
So if you're playing Bloodborne for the first time, I do recommend you go in and basically play the chalices until you get tired of them. And if you make it all the way through, cool, good for you. But you will get, you'll get experience. You'll get lots and lots of level ups out of going through, 2 or 3 bespoke chalice dungeons. You'll get upgrade materials and stuff like that. You'll get to see some cool enemy designs that only exist in the chalice dungeons. There are some interesting boss fights down there. I think the bespoke bosses are down in the chalice dungeons for a reason and not in the main game. I think they're generally weaker than the main game bosses. In the beginning levels, I haven't fought the deeper ones. Some bosses from the main game have new forms that show up in the Chalice dungeons. I'm not a huge fan of those, but anyway, just wanted to mention the Chalice dungeons. There's also kind of a compendium for all of the proc gen seeds for Chalice dungeons online now. They're theoretically infinite, but they're not, and people have like compiled all of them because Bloodborne fans are sickos. And so if you
they're insane.
If you really need, you're like, I need a special variation of Ludwig's Holy Blade, you can find the exact Chalice dungeon where you can go find that. Or you're like, I need to farm these upgrade materials, where can I get it? You can find the seed, like the code basically to type in, and go find those online. If you really need, there's some also where you can get extreme amounts of experience. So like whatever you need, the Chalice dungeon deep divers have found the place where you can go do that. But yeah, not a huge fan overall.
The only additional comment I want to make about Chalice dungeons, because it's relevant to the rest of the game, is that the Chalice dungeons are kind of like, they feel baked into the intended progression of power throughout the game.
Yeah.
Like, you can do a full playthrough without chalices, which is how I've done it almost every single playthrough, but you will have a tangibly much harder time. Well, maybe not much harder, but you will tangibly have a reasonably harder time as a result.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that, like, of all the things that I love about the game, and I love more every time I play it, one thing I hate more is when I don't want to do chalices, which is most times, and just have that feeling of, okay, I'm hitting way too lightly, I'm doing way too little damage, I'm dying way too quickly, I'm very clearly meant to have gotten an extra 10, 15 levels just from, and, better gems just from exploring chalices.
Yeah.
And, I know there are those sickos that found all those dungeons. I just gotta tell you this one thing. If you tell me you've 100% in Bloodborne and you haven't gotten every set to 99 and you haven't beaten every single one of those literal hundreds of proc gen chalices, I want you to shut the fuck up and go back to PlayStation 4 and not come talk to me until you've beaten every single one of those dungeons. Because you are a fake Bloodborne player if you've not done every single proc gen dungeon.
Well, I guess I'm out then.
Yep. I'm
Bye,
out
Jake.
too. Yeah.
Bye, Dave. I guess I'm going to edit the podcast myself. Oh, no. Come back. I changed my mind. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. But Moon is right there. You'll, after a certain early game boss, you'll get the items you need to open up one Chalice dungeon. And I think the game intends you to go do it then, because you will stay at or a little bit ahead of the power curve if you're doing that. As you go. So I think, like I said, you should go in, you should see what they are, see the new enemies and stuff like that, and then just quit playing them when you get tired of them. And if you're like
You'll
me and
probably
Jake,
be okay.
well, and like Moon said, he doesn't play them on replays either. So like you'll probably get to a point where you get sick of them because they're just overall not great. But what is great in Bloodborne is the DLC, which you absolutely, if you're playing Bloodborne, if you're going to buy it, maybe, I don't know.
Just get the complete edition.
Do you have to start, do you guys know, do you have to start a file, like start a save game with the DLC already installed? No?
No,
Okay.
you don't.
Basically, if you start the game with the DLC installed, the items that you need to start the DLC show up in the dream after you beat a particular boss in the vanilla game. And if you don't, if you buy the DLC later, which is what I did, if you've already passed that point, then the DLC item will simply spawn into the dream next time you load in there.
Okay, cool.
When I first beat the game, I didn't go do the DLC until, I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but I was at the point where a specific location drastically changes right before the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then I went and did the DLC and came back.
This is fine.
The game was over.
Yeah.
I
So my recommendation to everyone playing is either buy the complete edition and just trust us that the DLC is very good, or trust me, I assume that you guys agree to some extent.
I think I'd say it's mandatory, honestly.
It's very,
yeah. Yep.
If you like the game, you got to play it.
Right. And then, if you don't want to spend the extra money for the DLC, I have a feeling that if you play the game and you like it, let me rephrase that. If you start up the game and you like it, then you should buy the DLC, because the DLC is excellent. I think it's more difficult than the base game. It's like basically like Jake said, I think you should do it right before you fight the final boss, or at least very close to the end. It's difficult, but I think that the DLC has 2 of my favorite levels in the game, and it has maybe 3 of my top 5 or top 6 bosses in the DLC. It's just excellent content. And as far as DLC goes, FromSoftware is usually pretty good with DLC. I don't love the Dark Souls 1 DLC, and I really don't love the Dark Souls 3 DLC, but the Dark Souls 2 DLC is excellent. And Bloodborne is, I think it's the best DLC that they've done, the Bloodborne DLC.
Yep.
The story takes you back kind of in time. You'll travel backwards through time in the story and kind of find out the origins of some of the things that are happening in the game. And I've said it's excellent, but the last thing I want to say is that if you have the DLC installed, please look at a guide for how to access it, because like other FromSoftware stuff, it is the least intuitive shit possible. And it's
because it's something that if you come across it before you're at the point that you're able to access the DLC, it just kills you.
Yeah.
Which means that if that's your experience, why would you suddenly go back there because you have some new thing in your inventory?
Okay, so I do want to slightly defend it as slightly less unintuitive, mainly for a couple of reasons. One, it is literally you just picking up an item in the Hunter's Dream and then going to a single area. When you compare that to Dark Souls 1, where it's like, oh, kill this mini-boss, and then go over to this corner and kill this enemy, and then talk to this character, then go back to this random area that has nothing to do with it and kill this enemy, and then go back to this area. It is literally just you pick up the consumable from the dream. I feel like when I recently played, I checked on this, I feel like the description gives you a hint as to where to go. I think
it does. It kind of does, but as item descriptions in FromSoftware games go, it's not the strongest hint.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about it is that I do agree with Jake. Like, that can put you off to ever wanting to try it again if you happen to get killed by the thing that's supposed to take you to the DLC. However, I will say later in the game, you do have an experience of that same kind of thing happening elsewhere, and it teleports you somewhere.
It's true.
So that could be kind of like a hint.
Maybe I'll go check that again.
Maybe I should try that again. Because
that's true.
Or, at the very least, it'll go like, oh, wait, if I can do this now, maybe I can do it at this other place now too.
I think that's a big leap, a logical leap there. Like, even if it didn't kill you the first time, you have to go to a certain spot. Not only do you have to go there, but you have to stand still in a certain spot for a few seconds, which is not something you're generally doing in the game. The one thing that it does do is later in the game, you will be deposited in that exact spot later, if I remember right. After you beat a certain boss, you will be deposited in this spot. And maybe if you just sit still, it'll take you to the DLC.
Well, you have to remember the spot where you have to stand has a pickup as well. Like, it has a full gear set, and it is, and this one is a little bit of a leap, but it is possible that it's be like, oh sweet, let me look at what that is, and then when you're in the menu,
yeah. Anyway, not to belabor this, I just general advice for all FromSoftware games. Actually, Dark Souls 3 is... Nope, Dark Souls 3, you still have to do some obtuse shit before you can access the DLC. Just go look at a guide, type in Google how to access Bloodborne DLC. It's not super complicated, but, like, you might not figure it out on your own, and that would be a tragedy because the DLC is excellent. So... we are going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to give our final thoughts about Bloodborne before the spoiler wall. right. So, time to finish up the non-spoiler section of the show by giving our final thoughts in summary about Bloodborne for people who haven't played, or, I mean, people who have played and just want to hear kind of everything condensed down to a summary. Moon, what do you want the listeners to know about Bloodborne?
Okay, Bloodborne is... God, where do I start? I've said my thoughts on this so many times. Bloodborne is... I already said it. I already kind of spoiled it earlier. It is my favorite game of all time. I think that there is there's something very magical about... Because FromSoftware, like, their journey with the Soulsborns, which is basically the only stuff by them I've played. I've played Demon Souls through Sekiro at this point. I'm going to play Elden Ring when it comes out. They've kind of been on this almost singular trajectory towards making, like, basically trying to make the pacing of a character action game work within their more complex and fidgety action RPG framework, right? Like, we see that, we definitely see, how that moved forward in Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro after Bloodborne. And I feel like there's something really magical about Bloodborne being this, like, what I feel like this perfect sweet spot where when you're deep in the throes of combat, where you are moving fast and stylishly and just pulling off sick moves with your weapons, but you can still feel like the weight of your character at all times. And I'm not saying that there aren't other character action games that have a good feeling of weight, because there are. But, if you take a look at, like a Bayonetta or another Platinum game, there is this this intentional and good, but this is this feeling of, like, being bouncy and light and just being able to, like, jump and double jump, at your leisure. Whereas Bloodborne, it's like you're shackled to the ground. So when you are in combat, just like, pulling off the sick shit, even if it's not as stylish as a Bayonetta or a Devil May Cry, you do kind of feel like that kind of badassery more intensely, because you're doing that with shackles on your feet, essentially. Like, almost literally in terms of, like, how you move compared to those. And, I desperately, desperately wish From would, like, return to that, like, particular medium pacing, like, even if it's just in a Bloodborne 2 or something, because it's incredibly unique among not necessarily the Souls-like space, but like just kind of like the action game space, the melee, action game space. It feels incredibly unique and incredibly good. Right. And, play it. It's a good game. If you like action games or action RPGs of any description, try Bloodborne out, please.
Right. Jake, what do you want people to know about Bloodborne?
I mean, I definitely recommend it. The people listening can't see, but you two can. Got a Bloodborne tattoo right there on my arm next to the Dark Souls tattoo.
Oh, wow. It says, Lady Maria, will you marry me? That's amazing.
I absolutely love the game. I love the atmosphere. I love how it plays. I love digging into and finding out about the lore, because I'm too dense to get it from the game itself. I love everything about it, and I really want more Bloodborne in some shape or fashion. A PS5 remaster, a Bloodborne 2, just something. I want something more.
just put it on PC. Could you like imagine if we got people making like a randomizer for Bloodborne, or like Daughters of Ash for Bloodborne,
like
Scorch
Cinders.
Contract for Bloodborne. Holy,
they could do some cool stuff.
I don't do mods. That would change my mind. It's like,
oh yeah,
you would also get, the Thomas the Tank Engine mods and the waifu titty mods and stuff like that too. So
I mean, yes, you can filter the mods you're gonna use. It's not mandatory.
Yeah. All right. To kind of wrap up what I think about Bloodborne, this is, like I said in the opening, this is definitely one of my favorite games ever. It's probably, it's my favorite of the Souls games, which are all games that are like very, very special to me. This one's definitely my favorite one of those. And I just think it's like the flavor of Bloodborne. We didn't talk so much about like the, the storyline of like the beasts and the Lovecraftian stuff, but all that flavor on top of the combat that Moon described. It's really expressive. It's really flashy, and it's stylish. Really, really good and fun. And yeah, it's closer to a traditional action game. Like, it's not hack and slash, because if you just tap, 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 you're going to die in Bloodborne most of the times. But it is closer to that, so it does get like more action into it. It's a little bit less methodical than the Dark Souls games. So this is definitely one of my favorite games ever. I think that if you have a PlayStation, PS4, or PS5, I think you should try this. It's definitely one of the best exclusive games. If you have an Xbox or PC, basically if you don't have a PlayStation, I hope you get a chance someday if they put it on PC or something like that, because this is a really special game. Magical is a good word for it that Moon used. So very, very good game. Before we get into spoilers, Jake and Moon, is there anything you guys want to plug? YouTube channels, social media, anything like that? Twitch channels?
Well, since I was last on, I've started, more regularly and seriously uploading to YouTube for some godforsaken reason. I want to turn to like PewDiePie or whatever. I do have a YouTube channel where I just kind of like upload, just like gameplay, sometimes let's play, sometimes commentary, etc. You can find me there at Stylish Moonborn. Stylish has 3 S's. When you look it up, there will be fancy S's. And Moonborn has an E at the end, just like Bloodborne. Just today, in fact, I put up because my birthday was yesterday, I just put up a special commentated playthrough of the letter V 6 times, which is one of my favorite indie games. I play a lot of action games, a lot of Souls-likes, a lot of Metroidvanias. If you like any of that, maybe check it out. You might find something you like.
Is that the proper way to pronounce the name of that game? I always just did v.
See, in my head, I've always pronounced it V, but then I realized how idiotic that sounds, out loud. But the official, it has 3 official pronunciations, which are V, V6, and the letter V 6 times. Those are all official pronunciations according to the developer. So,
okay. Jake, how about you, man?
I've got nothing.
Good man.
I used to have a podcast that I did regularly. I do not anymore, so I show up here and there, like on the show.
Okay.
Oh, no, they're smarter than both of us, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, like, imagine not having 3 social media accounts that you need to, or 3 accounts on each social media platform between my personal things and 2 podcasts. I'm frankly jealous that there's not a whole lot to mention there. So anyway, I will put links to Moonborne's stuff down in the episode description. Please check out what he's doing. We are going to move into the spoiler section for Bloodborne, but first, I want to say if you're going to tap out now because you don't want Bloodborne spoilers, thank you for listening this far. Go play Bloodborne and come back later. And if you want to support Tales from the Backlog, the best thing that you can do is to subscribe on your platform of choice. Leave ratings and reviews. That is helpful. Help me fight the algorithm. And let's see. Yeah, follow the social media pages. Those links are in the episode description. Talk to me about Bloodborne. I'll be posting some gameplay videos and stuff like that from my most recent playthrough. I also do a podcast called A Top 3 Podcast, where each episode we pick a topic and we do our top 3. And we did an episode last year called Top 3 Video Games of the 2010s Decade, and Bloodborne came up. So go listen to that. That is a fun show. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into spoilers for Bloodborne. Oh, also, Bloodborne boss tier list episode coming later this week. Almost forgot. Okay, music. I am back with Jake and Moonborne talking spoilers for Bloodborne, and we're going to get started with kind of the story of it all and what's happening as you go. So, like, and this is my own understanding as someone who doesn't read item descriptions and has only, I listen to podcasts and stuff like that, but I actually tell myself all the time, like, this is the playthrough where I'm going to stop and read the item descriptions. And then I get halfway through Central Yharnam and I'm like, oh, I haven't read an item description in 3 hours and I picked up 35 items. Well, I guess I'm not reading those. So basically, here's how I understand it. So a team of university professors and students at Bergenworth, right, uncover the remains of an ancient civilization underneath the city of Yharnam. They find a great one. Yeah. A cosmic deity, and they use its blood. Its blood is the source of the blood ministration, right? Or the source of the healing properties.
It's a bit convoluted in a way that we probably can't get too into, but there are kind of like two backstories to Bloodborne. One that's in the Chalice Dungeons and one that's in the DLC. The DLC kind of obviates it, but not exactly. What ends up happening is that the Chalice Dungeons tell the story of like the civilization that existed before the people of Yharnam, and the DLC tells a story of the origin of the blood and the curse, etc. The Great One costs in the DLC. That's where they get the old blood, is my understanding, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, and then the Great One that they find in the Chalice Dungeons is somehow different.
Yeah, I don't really remember I'm not as versed on the Chalice Dungeons lore as much as I am on the DLC lore. Not that I'm an expert on either, but, it's like...
Right. Okay, well, anyway, so the point is they're using the blood of great ones to, like, give these healing properties to this blood ministration, right? That's what's...
The blood strengthens, it heals. It is the cure-all that some people pretend weed is, basically.
Yeah. So it's the detox of the Bloodborne universe. So anyway, but the problem with this here blood ministration is that there is a curse or a plague associated with it, right? So this is where the beast plague comes from, is from using this blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it comes from using the blood, and also because they got cursed for what they did to Koss.
Right,
basically.
So everything comes together. So that's why at the beginning of Bloodborne, you're meant to go out and hunt beasts, and this is the cause of the beasthood curse. So you'll see lots of enemies that have turned into, like, werewolf type things, and then the prominent figures, like in the healing church, you come across them, and they're these even more hideous, like, beast monstrosities.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's, I guess, the combination of this using the blood of cosmic deities, which is frankly bad idea, I think.
Yeah.
If I come across a cosmic deity, probably going to leave its blood alone, and then you have the curse of what the original hunters, right, did to a great one in the fishing hamlet, which is the DLC story, and then they get a curse put upon them.
Yeah, it's like probably not a good idea to mess with that old blood. It's like, I too, but I understand because, I too see an alien's blood and think, well, Jesus was kind of an alien and he said to drink his blood. So,
just inject this shit right in my veins. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we have the beast plague, and then we also have the kind of storyline with the great ones, people trying to create great ones, people trying to maybe ascend themselves, as far as I understand it. And then we have this introduction of the nightmare that a lot of the hunters are subject to because of a curse that was put on them due to their misdeeds. Just one lore thing that I really love is that Maria is there guarding the secret to the curse, basically keeping you out so that you don't understand this. but we do have this kind of like nightmare world, real world, if it even is all real. Some of the levels are like obvious nightmares, like it's in the name, Nightmare Frontier, Nightmare of Mensis.
All but one
Hunter's
of the nightmare levels have nightmare in the title, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is this is where I start to get a little bit confused, and there's a lot of lore and stuff that I just, not that it's not interesting, but it's just kind of in one ear and out the other when I play. I'm much more about the play of Bloodborne, just like in Dark Souls, though. Like when I do have a podcast, not this podcast, but a different podcast or a YouTube video laying out the story of it, I really, really like it. I think it's really cool. So, yeah. There is a cool theory, though, that I have asked Moon to briefly describe, which is that the nightmare exists in layers, which is very cool to think about. So can you tell the listeners, if they haven't heard of it, what is the nightmare layer theory?
Oh, come on. I learned about the nightmare layers in second grade. What are you talking about?
I was too busy eating crayons to learn about that.
Anyway, so I don't know if this is supposed to be some kind of like Lovecraftian idea or not, but the nightmare realm in Bloodborne, theoretically, and this is one of the, and I know that like, Soulsborne is full of a lot of theories, and who knows how many of them are like actually like, have water to them, but this one I personally feel is pretty well supported explicitly in the game. The idea is that the nightmare realm is layered, with the older nightmares being kind of like at the bottom and the newer nightmares being layered each on top of it. And the way the theory works is that you have the Hunter's Nightmare, which is the first area from the DLC, at the very bottom. On top of that, you have Fishing Hamlet, which is the last area in the DLC. It is also literally physically elevated above where Hunter's Nightmare is, like if you pay attention to what you're doing, because after Hunter's Nightmare, you actually go upwards, like, to get to where the Fishing Hamlet is. But more importantly, when you go to Fishing Hamlet, like, most of it is water, right? Because it's a fishing village. If you look into the water, you can clearly see the reflection of the Hunter's Nightmare in the water. So, like, the idea is that the Hunter's Nightmare is beneath the water, beneath Fishing Hamlet. And then beyond that, you have the Nightmare Frontier, which is an optional area in the main game, which a lot of people dislike, but I kind of like that area nowadays, but that's besides the point. It is an optional area, and it's kind of like this weird, like, I guess you could say it's almost like a kind of like, it has this kind of weird, like, Super Mario 64 energy to it, where it's just kind of like a level suspended in the air with like an abyss around you. Mm-hmm. And if you look into the abyss, you can see like these masts of like broken and like shipwrecked ships, these wrecked ships, like kind of poking out from underneath where the abyss is. And Fishing Hamlet has a bunch of wrecked ships just kind of like poking upward. So, like, the idea is like you have Hunter's Nightmare and then Fishing Hamlet on top of it, and then the Nightmare Frontier on top. And that's the basics of the theory. There is a little more to it, because, like, for example, Nightmare of Mensis, which is the last area in the base game, like, you can actually see Nightmare Frontier in the distance. So presumably, the Nightmare of Mensis is at the same level as the Nightmare Frontier above where, the Fishing Helmet is, etc. But the real basics of it is just kind of those three. That, like, there's at least these three layers. And the events kind of, the nightmares kind of exist in sequence, starting from the bottom and going up.
Yeah, and it's just a cool, like, I don't really get down with a lot of fan theories for most things, actually, but that is something that's really cool. And once you start to point out, like, hey, if you look down or if you look up in these certain areas, you can see things that look like other areas from the game, and that's really cool. And since it is like a nightmare space, that is, I guess, more feasible. Yeah. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. But what I do really like to talk about is the gameplay. Actually, we should talk about the endings for Bloodborne. I have beaten the game twice, so I have gotten both of the endings where you say no to Gurman at the end, and you I got the squid ending, and I got the. Actually, are there 4 endings or are there 3?
There are 3. Yeah,
3,
there are
okay.
3.
Yeah. So I got the ending where you're sitting in Gurman's chair, and then I got the squid ending. Yeah. So those are the ones I got. There's the other one where Gurman asks you to submit, and you accept, and he cuts your head off, which I think is a great. I think that's very funny for a way for you to end this game. And then it shows you
I've had
kind of
enough
like
of this shit.
waking up. It's called like the morning ending or something like that.
Yarnum Sunrise.
Yarnum Sunrise, right?
I should make a cocktail called the Yarnum Sunrise.
Yeah.
I feel like that exists. I think I've heard of that.
It's a I don't know, a tequila sunrise with a little bit of like
Blood?
eldritch blood. Yeah. One
It's
thing that's really cool.
It's a tequila sunrise where you cut yourself when you were making the garnishes.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I thought was really cool is I was actually watching Moon stream his most recent playthrough, and Moon did like full beasthood. So his character was like a werewolf man. And Jake, I don't know if you saw this in the Slack, but
should I explain it?
Yeah, go ahead. It's I cracked up laughing watching the stream.
Yeah, we both cracked up. Basically, one of the things I'm doing with these kind of playthroughs I'm doing of the series is I'm trying to play them with kind of like the experience and commentary for like maybe someone who doesn't play these games, who still wants to get a vicarious experience. Which is basically a way of me saying, in Bloodborne, I tried to do all the side quests. I tried to do the, quote, most complete, hardest to get ending. And one of the things you have to do for the ending is you have to collect certain consumables and then use them before
we're in the
beating the final
spoilers.
boss.
You can say umbilical cords and
okay,
all
yeah.
that,
You collect umbilical cords and you eat them. It's like
as you do.
You basically, there are arcane, like I guess kind of like Great One infant umbilical cords that you can collect throughout the game. There are 4 of them. 4/3 is a Lovecraft thing. I don't know to what degree, but it's a third umbilical cord, but there's 4 of them. But you need 3 of them. And if you do that and then beat the final boss, you will unlock a true final boss after that. And what I did was, I was going to save the umbilical cords just kind of like for dramatic effect. I was going to save them all before the final boss and then consume them and then fight the boss. I forgot to do that, and to beat the boss, there's a kind of build you can do where you turn into a werewolf, basically, and and basically what it does is that you take more damage, but you also do way more damage. So I completely wrecked the final boss, and now which is the ending where you basically kind of take the final boss's place as the keeper of the dream. You're kind of the old man in the wheelchair, and I was like, oh shoot, I forgot to use the umbilical cords, and because it just uses your character as they are with their full gear and everything, you just see like the doll wheel me up in a wheelchair, and I'm just this big hulking werewolf man. Like he's like,
I saw the screenshot.
You see the close up on his hand, and it's just this huge werewolf hand, just about to break the wheelchair in half. I'm really gonna try to like catfish someone and be like, oh yeah, I won't bite you. All the more to see you with, my dear.
It was excellent.
It's so good.
Watching the just like I could tell Moon was really disappointed that he forgot to eat the umbilical cords and like not gonna get the final boss fight. But then as soon as it showed his like the dawning realization, like, oh, I'm still in beast form. Oh, he's in beast form in the cutscene. He's just the doll wheeling this like kind of brain dead werewolf around the hunter's dream was really, really funny. So
it's so good.
Yeah. Jake, I don't know how many times you've completed Bloodborne, but is there an ending that you really like in particular?
I mean, I love the just weirdness of becoming a squid baby, Great One, and the doll just holding you. It's so good.
Cradling you like a baby.
Yeah.
But, one of the things, like you said, where you can basically just submit to Gehrman and then not fight him or the moon presence, and then the amount of optional stuff in the game. If you're looking at the base game, not the DLC, there's 17 bosses, and you can beat the game fighting 7 bosses.
Yeah,
of the 17.
There's a lot that are optional. There's a lot that
it's so weird to think of it that way. Like, it's crazy to me because I'm like, I always just fight everything. I go everywhere. It's what I do.
Like, it feels like Bloodstarved Beast is a mandatory part of the playthrough, but it's not.
I mean, not even the Cleric Beast is.
And interestingly enough, if you beat the Cleric Beast, what you can do is you can beat the Cleric Beast, and then you can buy an emblem at the shop that unlocks the front door to the Grand Cathedral, as opposed to going to where the Bloodstarved Beast is, which unlocks a different door through the back. If you do that and you buy the emblem, when you go into New Game Plus, you don't have to fight either of them, because you keep the item from the Cleric Beast that allows you to buy the Hunter Chief emblem. So you can totally skip both. So New Game Plus actually technically has, if you play your cards right, has one less required boss than than your original playthrough does, which is pretty interesting.
So, I wanted to do a quick, couple of top threes as we get into like talking full spoilers, instead of going level by level or going boss by boss, because there's just frankly too much for this show. People have made entire careers doing level by level, boss by boss, character by character breakdowns of Bloodborne. Just want to get a quick top 3 levels that you guys have. So I don't know if you guys thought of this ahead of time, but I'll go ahead and say my 3 off the top of my head. Central Yharnam, the first level, it's big. It's really big. But it is like your Undead Burg, and it is teaching you basically everything you need to know about the game. All the basic mechanics you'll learn about in Central Yharnam, so that's in there. The Research Hall in the DLC is in my top 3. Just spooky, more spooky than the average level, I think. And like, you see the horrors that they're doing to people in that place and those liquid things in bags that you can talk to are so goddamn creepy. So that's in there. And then I will also say that I really love, the fishing hamlet. Those whales are really fucking hard, and I kind of get sick of them sometimes, but I love the design, how everything is covered in barnacles. I love how it's full of these villagers turned fishmen. Love the fishing hamlet. So that's my top 3: Central Yharnam, the Research Hall, and the fishing hamlet.
My top 3 here, when I talk about top stuff, some people are very critical about it, and they'll be like, it's my top because it's the best. Mine is totally how I feel about the atmosphere and or lore and story of the area. So 2 of mine are the same as 2 of yours, Dave. My first one is also Central Yharnam, and it's totally that atmosphere that you first get dumped into. It's creepy, it's spooky, it's a great level learning what to do. You spend forever there on your first playthrough, and then on future ones you can get through it pretty dang quick. It's just a great first area. My next one is Forsaken Canehurst Castle.
Oh yeah,
because it's so different from everything else. This snowy castle, and the enemies are very different. I hate the freaking bloodsuckers, though, outside. I hate those things immensely. I hate fighting them. They bug the crap out of me. But then you get into this, like, haunted castle. You're fighting ghosts and gargoyles, and it's so different. And it's a really fun, contained story. Like, the lore for that is very much its own contained little thing that does connect to other outside things, but I just really enjoy that as this little offshoot. You go and you do it, and that's kind of it. And then my other one is also Fishing Hamlet. Again, the atmosphere there is just amazing. I love how it's a different type of villagers becoming beasts, because you start the game and it's villagers becoming werewolf type beasts, and then here it's villagers becoming fish type beasts. And it's just cool showing that there's different ways this could go, which gives really cool ideas for, if they ever make sequels. you could be in a desert area with like lizard type beasts. Like there's so much they could do with it. Like it's not, confined to one type of thing, and it just shows that. And again, the atmosphere and the lore of what happened there is so good.
Yeah, for sure. Canehurst is one of my favorites too. Just like you said, just exploring a spooky castle, and a good boss fight in there too, as we'll talk about a little bit later, I think. But yeah, good. Moon, how about you?
Oh man, I like so many of them. It's I've played the game so many times that it's gotten to the point that like I only have one area I really dislike, and that would be Hunter's Nightmare, honestly, for a number of reasons.
Hunter's Nightmare.
Yeah, just it could just be I did not have fun last time I played it. But favorites, I'm gonna just do them in I'm gonna do them in game chronological order rather than preferred order, because I can't decide between the three.
Sure.
I think I'm going to go with Central Yharnam. That is without a doubt my favorite starting area in a Soulsborne. Like, they've really captured that kind of Demon Souls 1-1, like with all the looping shortcuts and everything and all the places you can go pretty well. I also really like I already forgot what my second answer was. I really oh shoot. I can't believe I forgot. I had three of them in my head. This one's gonna like send everyone to the Shadow Realm. I really like Forbidden Woods a lot.
Oh, I really do too. It's good.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
It is an area that I understand why people really dislike, because it is really easy to get lost and get super frustrated. And I don't want to be the person who invalidates the first playthrough, because the first impression does matter. But just because because I've played the game so many times, like I've come to really know that area. And when you kind of know that particular area, all the different places you can go into it are really cool and good.
Yeah. I love the Forbidden Woods too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. And for 3, yeah, I'm going to go with Castle Canehurst. Castle Canehurst is really, really, really cool. Like, that is just, like, I don't have anything special to say about it that hasn't already been said, but, it is really cool how, like, you come from the land of werewolves, and then you go to the land of your enemies, which is the land of vampires, because of course they hate you. They're vampires. They don't like werewolves. So,
everyone
enemies.
knows this. This is common. Yeah. They're natural enemies.
That's what I learned in second grade.
Never let a vampire into your house, silly boy. It leaves you powerless.
Yeah.
I mean, we all learned that from Kate Beckinsale, right?
I was thinking Lost Boys, but...
I want to throw an honorable mention to Old Yharnam, which is... for having like some very direct storytelling, more direct than From usually does with their with their areas. The story about how the church basically burned the town and locked the doors to try and contain the beasts in there or get rid of them. Everybody's favorite NPC hunter Jura in Old Yharnam. The shock that you get the first time you go in and he starts firing that Gatling gun at you.
You're like, what?
Yeah. And the big ass like cathedral where they're burning the blood-starved beast corpse so cool. Up there. It's
and you can
so cool.
you can set everything on fire and all that. It's so great.
Yep. It's a very, very good level, both thematically, I guess, story-wise, and then also like play-wise. It's really, really good. I still can't beat Jura without getting him to roll off the edge of the platform. I've never beaten him fair. Fuck him. He doesn't fight fair either, so fuck him.
Yeah.
I think the first time I beat him, I didn't know about the edge thing, and I eventually beat him fair. And then every single time since then, I'm like, I'm just knocking that guy off. This is not worth it.
Yeah. If I had to choose some honorable mentions, if I had to choose honorable mentions, I would definitely go with Nightmare of Mensis. I actually really like Nightmare of Mensis.
I do. Once you get past the frenzy section at the beginning, I really like it too. But the frenzy section at the beginning fucking sucks.
But yeah, like I really like Nightmare of Mensis. I really like what's it called? I do really like Cathedral Ward, just, kind of for the reasons I mentioned earlier. I do like how it's kind of like the center of this world. And I kind of like Nightmare Frontier quite a bit, too. I think that's another one that, like Forbidden Woods, y'all can't see it, but they're like shaking their heads disappointedly at me.
I hate Nightmare Frontier so much.
I don't hate it as much as Yahar Ghul and Sin Village.
Yeah, Yahar Ghul sucks. Oh yeah, that's right. That's the other one I didn't like this playthrough. But yeah, Nightmare Frontier, to me, it's a similar reasoning to Forbidden Woods, where like it really, really, really blows until you actually get to really know the area. Then it's kind of cool, in my opinion. Even though I really wish it was like connected to somewhere else rather than kind of being like, a dead end, basically.
If I was going to do an honorable mention, it would be Henwick Charnel Lane. That place scares the crap out of me. It is the scariest place to me because the cackling witches and stuff freaks me out, and I am freaked out every time I play it.
Get me more than any other.
That's why I like it. Is that one is just, it does such a good job of just suddenly bringing in the terrifying witch feeling of like Baba Yaga and old myths like that. Just this terrifying witches that want to eat you. And it's so good at it.
It is very good. And like for time's sake, we're doing a top 3. And also because of my other podcast, I can't really think of lists in other form because my brain is poisoned now. But the areas, like I think Moon said, there's only a couple areas that I would say I really, really dislike in Bloodborne. Most of them are, at the very least, good and interesting in some way. But I think the ones that we've kind of highlighted here, a lot of them are excellent at something. My first time playing the game, this is something that I think is very interesting that's been brought up on other podcasts. If you're listening to this and you really love Bloodborne and you haven't listened to Bonfireside Chat, go listen to that because they do such an excellent job of going through the game, breaking it down. But this is something that they talk about on their show a lot that kind of got me interested in this, is when you first played the game, or maybe even on replays, which bosses do you think are really, really hard? Because our lists, I think, are going to be very different from each other because we're all good at certain things and we're all not very good at certain things, and different bosses are testing different things. So my first playthrough, I really had a hard time with the Bloodstarved Beast. Really had a hard time with Rom. I think I fought Dark Beast Parl too early, and I had a really hard time with Parl. Ludwig, I could not beat by myself. I had to summon help. And then Orphan of Kos took me like 15 to 20 tries, but I had a lot of fun doing it. So I don't really count Kos in that. But those were the ones that I found really difficult my first time. So before we talk about top 3 bosses and kind of wrap this episode up, what bosses stand out to you as ones that gave you the most trouble?
Okay. Well, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but because Bloodborne was my first Soulsborne that I played proper, almost every single boss was a wall, by which I mean a boss, like to this day, like, whenever, y'all see, like, when we get into discussions about hard bosses in the series, someone will say that a boss is a wall, and then I'll find out that it took them 6 tries, and I kind of scoff. Because, like, to me, like, just kind of like, I've been like, Miyazaki has abused me and traumatized me to the point where, like, if it takes less than an hour, it's not a wall to me. But aside from that, as special walls, a lot of the obvious ones, on my first playthrough, Orphan of Kos was Orphan of Kos and Lawrence the First Vicar. Those were both bosses that I just kept ping-ponging between literally for like 2-3 weeks to beat them. Like that was all I did for about 2-3 weeks. Just kept like going between one and the other to try to beat them. So those were the last bosses I had left, and I had a really hard time with them. And this is when I didn't understand builds either. So like I had this really like, I didn't understand RPGs at all at the time. So like I had this messed up build where I was like, oh, well, 30 points into strength, because that sounds good. Oh, well, I found a cannon that requires 40... I found a cannon that requires 40 blood tinge. Let me level up blood tinge, even though I'm using no blood tinge weapons. Like, just dumb stuff like that. So, like, my build was... And my damage output was really bad, right? Aside from that, I definitely got stuck on ROM. I definitely got stuck on... who else? Bloodstar Beast wasn't too bad. Gascoigne wasn't too bad. Vicar Amelia was a boss I got stuck on for many playthroughs. Like, I always... Like, that, like, the kind of difficulty she has at that point in the game, for some reason, tends to feel pretty rough to me. Even though I've finally gotten better at it in more recent playthroughs.
Yeah, Vicar Amelia is one where, like, it's not so much that she's really hard. It's just like if you don't have your build figured out and you're not doing enough damage, she can be, like, quite literally impossible to beat if you don't have the DPS, if you haven't been upgrading your weapons and stuff. So, Jake, what are the wall bosses for you?
So my dirty little secret with Soulsborns is that until the last couple years, I was always way too scared to try to beat bosses on my own. I always summoned. For the most part, I would give a boss like 1 or 2 tries on my own just to see what it's like, and then summon, like, every time. But
I summoned my way through Dark Souls 3, probably over half of those bosses I summoned helped to beat. So, like, no shame there. It's a game mechanic.
I think Dark Souls 3 is the only one at this point where I have beat every single boss on my own at some point. Mm-hmm. It's the only one that I've done that. Bloodborne, though, my first time playing it, the major walls for me, the first one was Father Gascoigne. Because I ran into Cleric Beast without realizing it and beat it on my first try, and I was like, holy crap, how did I do that? I must be good. I got this, and I got my butt handed to me over and over by Father Gascoigne. I can beat him now pretty easily, like, because you have to be aggressive. You have to dodge into him, and that was so hard for me at first. I was always backing away, and that's a death sentence with him. You back away, you're done.
You just gotta fight him like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Get on the stairs and make sure you're above him.
Yeah, I've never done the stairs.
I've never done the stairs either.
I didn't do it this time, but every previous playthrough, like, that was always how I did it, was get on the stairs and make sure I'm not at level with him.
For me, it's dodge through, get behind, hit, dodge through, get behind, hit. Yeah. Just be aggressive. He's an amazingly well designed boss, and absolutely. You appreciate that more when you learn the moveset, because he really does exactly.
Fight,
yeah, but he was wall for me.
He's a great test at the end of Central Yharnam to see if you're ready for the rest of the game. I just parry the shit out of Gascoigne now. He's really easy to parry once you're
he is.
comfortable with it. Yeah. Okay. Any more?
Yeah. So my other walls, Bloodstar Beast, like you said, it can still throw me for a loop sometimes now. I'm better, but that thing is so aggressive, and then it gets the poison around it, and I'm just, ugh. And then Martyr Ligarius, tough as balls to me. He is ridiculous. And Ludwig, of course. I mean, everyone is like, what the hell with him?
Pretty insane. Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't say Ludwig, because that's the boss I literally spent 11 hours to beat solo on my second playthrough.
Yeah.
That was a big wall for me. Yeah.
He's real hard. The other side of that coin, guys, give me one boss that other people say is really hard that you didn't have trouble with. Let's brag a little bit.
I got mine because both of you put Rom in it. I have never not first tried Rom. He is so easy to me every time. And I started hearing people say he was hard, and I was like, what? And it's funny because there are those bosses that are just totally different for people.
Yep.
Well, I beat the only boss I beat the first time was Celestial Emissary, and nobody else thinks that's easy, right? Right?
Oh, you just reminded me. Abriatus was a huge wall the first playthrough. I could not beat Abriatus. My one that everyone says is really hard that I've never had trouble with is Lawrence. I've beaten Lawrence on the second try both playthroughs. And
Wow.
then I heard Moon. I actually watched you fight Lawrence like 100 times on your recent stream,
Yep.
Moon. And I heard like the guys on Bonfireside chat talk about how difficult he was. And I just like, I don't know, I just kind of unlocked it somehow. I've never had any trouble with Lawrence. But like I said, it's okay to brag about some of these because like you said, Jake, you think ROM is easy and you feel good about that. And I get fucked up by ROM's like crystal from the sky attack consistently.
You just run.
Yeah, I mean, but it always takes me like 3 or 4 attempts to get it, and I get tagged by spiders. And
I didn't even have a hard time with ROM in the Chalice dungeons when you fight ROM in a much smaller space, and everyone says how much harder that makes it.
There's pillars to block the magic in the Chalice dungeon fight.
It's true. To me, the only thing was, since it was smaller, the spiders that run around were more annoying. They were harder to get around and to take care of, but I was still able to do it. It was a lot closer than in the big arena, but I still did it, I think, on my first try. It was a lot of like running and healing. Like, it took me a while. It wasn't just go in and beat it, but I survived.
Oh, you know what? No, for me, the boss I thought was easy was Abriatus, because I unwittingly played against her right before they patched out, like, where you can just kind of like get stuck between like her back tail or whatever. So like I beat her in only a few tries, and I was like, oh wow, this is so easy. You can totally just get behind her. But then on future playthroughs, nope.
They fixed it.
Yeah, my most recent playthrough, I was proud of myself because I did beat all the bosses for the first time by myself, including Ebriatus and Ludwig, who I thought were just impossible my first playthrough. I actually had to get on the subreddit where you can find people to help you. That's a good subreddit, by the way.
Yes,
I think
Hunter's Bell.
Hunter's Bell, yeah. If you're listening to this and you're like, I need help, but like I don't know anyone who plays Bloodborne, get on there because there are people who would love to come help you fuck up Ludwig or something like that.
I think that's how I beat Orphan of Kos. Was just went on Hunter's Bell and was like, somebody please help me. And it even took us with the person that was like, yeah, I can do that. It took us like 5 or 6 times, but they would just they're like, let's try it again, and we eventually got it.
Nice. Yeah. And the same thing when I played Dark Souls 3, I used the Summon Sign subreddit a lot.
Yep.
To get help.
I use that to get my platinum. People let me farm them for the collectibles you need, like the vertebrae shackles and stuff.
It's a colossal waste of time for people to be summoned in and let you kill them. But there are people who will help you out for sure.
They're like, for sure, do it.
Actually, now that I think about it, Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2 are the only ones where I beat all the bosses by myself. I couldn't find anyone to summon in Dark Souls 2. Bloodborne, I beat all of them by myself. I can't beat Ornstein and Smo by myself in Dark Souls 1 or Manus. But anyway, not to get too far into the other games. So we talked about the ones that we think are really hard for us personally.
Lauren
we talked
Dark
about
Beast,
the ones.
Sorry, I had to say that. I forgot that was the single hardest boss in the game for me. I hate that boss so much.
Which one?
Aloran Dark Beast. It is it is the Chalice version of Dark Beast Pearl, but somehow like it somehow showcases all the bad things about the game in a single boss. The frame rate tanks to the teens. The camera goes wonky so you can never see him. You flat out whiff your attacks whether you're targeting him or not targeting him because of the weird skeletal body. It's just this weird, super hard mode version of Dark Beast Pearl. They insisted on making one of the required bosses on the way to the end of the Chalice Dungeon story, basically.
Yeah, I think my most recent playthrough, I stalled out at the Watchdog of the Old Lords, not the defiled one, just the regular one, because it has some absolutely horseshit hitboxes
Defiled Watchdog
got me really frustrated, so I stalled out in there. Moon, have you fought Queen Yarnum?
Yes, I've done Queen Yarnum. Yes.
Is Yarnum in your top 3 bosses?
No, she's a cool boss, but she is not in my top 3.
Okay, cool. I just kind of wondered, like, since it is almost like another final boss, you know, like at the depths of the chalices. It's like, I never wanted to go through the chalices because of those ones where they put you at half health and you can just get killed in one hit. But is Yarnum actually fun to fight?
Yeah, it's a cool and interesting boss fight with unique mechanics. It is just not like, let me put it this way. If you're not as obsessive as I am, and like, you know, you hate the Chalice Dungeons the way, you know, most of us in here seem to, and the way a lot of people might, I do not think that it is worth the time investment just to get this one story boss on a mechanical level. It is thematically cool. Like, you know, you do see like cool things like Murgo crying is actually part of the mechanics in that boss fight, which is kind of interesting. Like that is like an audio tell for something she's about to do. But but it definitely wasn't like this like mind-blowing revelation. And I wasn't expecting it to be, but like it wasn't like this mind-blowing revelation like, oh my God, like you know, I can't believe they put a boss this amazing behind the chalices. Like it wasn't like, you know, it definitely wasn't like one of my favorites. Like even though I really liked it, it was really good. But
that makes me feel a little bit better. Sorry, Jake, I didn't mean to exclude you. I had forgotten. Did you say you actually got to the bottom of the chalices or not?
Okay. No, I never have, not yet.
Okay, yeah, I've seen some. I've seen gameplay videos of Queen Yarnum in that fight. It looks interesting, but like I've also heard people talk about their horror stories fighting the defiled amygdala and stuff like that, or amygdala, and I'm just like, you know, I didn't even get that far in the chalices before I got bored. Now I'm going to go like bang my head against that. Probably not.
Friend, I have to show you my video where I beat them in like 20 seconds because of the magic of 99 Arcane.
Oh yeah. I think
that's the build I went with for chalices, and I still had a hard time against some of those bosses, by the way. But
yeah. So as much as I love Bloodborne, even though I would say it's probably my favorite game, there's still some things in the game that don't sound fun, and I'm not going to go fuck with that. So, I guess the last thing that I have written down in the notes is to do a top 3 favorite bosses, since we've talked about our boss walls, and we've talked about the ones where we can brag a little bit, you know. So top 3 favorite bosses. Either one of you guys want to go first on this one?
I'll go.
Yeah,
I'll happily
go for it.
Okay, so top 3 favorite bosses. I'm going to do 3 top 3 favorites, but least favorite to most favorite among those top 3. So number 3 is probably going to be Gurman. I just think that, like, you know, just like it, like mechanically it's pretty cool. It's just that kind of like, you know, like there is a very, very, very like, you know, Japanese flavoring to, like, you know, you fight your master at the end and he's betrayed you.
In a field of those white flowers.
Yeah, in a field of those white flowers.
They love their battles in fields of flowers.
Yep. You get that.
Because it looks so cool.
You get that like beautifully sad music, you know, that plays in the theme. You get these really like. You get this really cool tease. I didn't notice this on my most recent playthrough, but you get this really cool tease that about the moon presence giving him aid, because when he does his power up in the final phase, he literally just kind of like raises up and looks at the moon, and the moon flashes before he starts glowing with that power or whatever, you know, with his like, you know, Super Saiyan form or whatever. It's just and he's still like, you know, until that final phase, he still fights like a human. So like the rules for like Gascoigne and Maria still apply. Like, you know, it is just, you know, you can still stun him and stagger him and use your like it is basically a finale of the kind of like, you know, have you learned how hunters fight type fight, which I really like.
Yeah, great spectacle in that fight for sure. Yeah,
for number 2, and this would have been number 1 until fairly recently when I had some thoughts about it. Number 2 is Ludwig. Ludwig, like I mentioned, is the biggest wall boss. Is one of the biggest wall bosses I've had in the game. I can no hit that first phase sometimes. Like, like it is one of my favorite bosses. It is fun to fight. The first phase in particular is a real showcase of my style of gameplay, where it's about min-maxing DPS versus dodges. Like, I know exactly where to dodge when and go in for the punish. Like, just constantly breaking his limbs, dodging straight through his arcane jizz, like just, yeah, just hitting that horseman right in the nose. The second phase, I am not that good at, even after all these playthroughs, and I like it reasonably less than the first phase. But it's still good the second phase, when he has the sword and everything. And that first phase alone is just really, really, really fun to fight.
Sorry, Moon, I'm going to have a hard time getting over the phrase arcane jizz.
You're welcome. Okay, so, number one, I doubt either of you have fought this one. It is a boss in the Chalice Dungeons named the Thumerian Elder. Which, if you haven't seen the Thumerian Elder, look him up. Look up a video, or at least look up how he looks. He has the absolute sickest design, in the game. It's a real fun, kind of dual style fight. He has a he has a staff that he literally uses pyromancy to transform into different weapons. So he can make it a spear. He can turn it into a guts crossbow from Berserk. He can turn it into a sickle or a scythe or a morning star. He does all this fire damage. You're basically just fighting this ancient, almost Vulturian Twilight vampire, basically. And it's just really fun as a fight. I recommend looking it up. And it's pretty hard, but it's really fun, really challenging. Of all the, it is possible that I'm elevating this because of how dire the Chalice experience is. But I remember getting to him in the Chalice Dungeons and that was one of the times where I'm you know what? I'm glad I'm doing this. This is an incredibly fun boss and I love it. But yeah, that is probably my favorite boss in Bloodborne.
Nice.
The Thumerian Elder.
Kind of sucks that I'll probably never fight it, but I'll have to go look up a video. I looked at the design. The design is pretty fucking cool. He looks like a Castlevania boss or something like that.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he's like if he would be like if some misguided Western company made a Western reboot of Castlevania with, oh yeah, that already happened. I forgot. I wasn't trying to do a bit. I just forgot that happened. But he looks like the kind of gritty Xbox 360 reboot of Castlevania Dracula, but good.
Okay, so yeah. Jake, what's your top 3 bosses?
All right, so mine are similar to the levels, and they have just basically they're all about the lore and the vibe. The atmosphere of the bosses rather than the technical, mechanics of the fight. And I don't have them in any particular order. These are just my top 3.
Sure.
Father Gascoigne. Mm-hmm. I really like his entrance, the whole beast all over the shop, of course. And, it's a great test. I really like it a lot. And it's incredibly tragic. And I like things that are incredibly tragic. Mm-hmm. My next one is a bit of a cheat. I'm putting Gehrman and Moon Presence together because they're in the same arena back to back.
Sure.
Yeah, that works.
I like that combination. Again, like Moon said, Gehrman getting up and you having to fight him, and then leading into the crazy entrance of the Moon Presence and fighting, going from fighting a human to this weird alien monstrosity in the same field of flowers. That whole sequence I just absolutely love. And then my last one is Lady Maria.
Okay. I was worried neither of you were going to say Maria. She's...
Yeah, no, it's the atmosphere, the grabbing you as you go up to her, and the blood flying from her blade, and it's such a good duel style fight. It's so good. And
then once you realize, oh, she looks like the doll. Once you realize that, you're like, oh...
And sounds like the doll, yeah.
Yeah. Gehrman, what's up, my man?
Stop Gehrman.
What the hell is this? Why am I fighting your Daikamura, Gehrman?
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, good list. My top three, I also have Gascoigne in the top three. Gascoigne's great, partly for the story, like you mentioned, but also like, I don't know, you fight Cleric Beast, and Cleric Beast is like just a big dude, a big beast enemy. There's he looks cool and like he has a really good entrance, but like when you fight Gascoigne, that's when you first kind of see this like negative effect of everything that's happening to the hunters. It's your first kind of clue at that. So I love Gascoigne. The music in the Gascoigne fights also really good. I love it. Ludwig is my second, who like I said, my first playthrough, I could not beat him. And so he would have not been close to my top three. This most recent playthrough, I was able to take him out by myself. And that helped me appreciate the story. It helped me really appreciate the music in it, especially the second phase when the music changes after that awesome cutscene. And I'm actually the opposite of you, Moon. I cannot beat the first phase reliably, but if I can get to the second phase, it's very easy for me. But I would say I fought him maybe 20 times trying to get my solo win, and I got to the second phase maybe 3 times that whole time.
Oh, wow.
And the second phase, I don't know, a big sword is much easier for me to dodge than charging horsey. So also that big, the big beam attack is, if you know how to get around it, it's free, a third of his health.
Free
bar.
damage, yeah.
Yeah. So Ludwig, that's my second. And then my favorite's Orphan of Kos, even though it takes me 20 plus tries each playthrough to beat him. I just love that fight. I love how primal he is. The screams are, you want to talk about sound design, the screams on Orphan of Kos are haunting. His second phase gets kind of, it's a lot, when he goes frenzy mode.
One-winged angel.
Yeah, I remember watching Moon stream it, and then when I was streaming Bloodborne myself, I had so much trouble beating him. That playthrough, I can beat his first phase really, really reliably, but the second phase is just so fast, so aggressive. It feels like the proper final boss of the game to me. And then honorable mention to Logarius. I really love that fight. I love him swooping in from the sky and stuff like that. Just on top of a snowy castle rooftop. Really, really enjoy it. So those are my top 3. So yeah, any others we want to mention? Bosses or levels or anything like that we want to bring up before we wrap this up?
I do have a final comment I want to make about the game.
Yeah.
One thing I think is interesting, and this was mentioned way earlier when all 3 of us, when we were talking about how we discovered Bloodborne, we all made some variant of the comment of, everyone said you had to play this, you got to play this, it is the best PS4 game, you got to play it. And one thing I remember, and I have not recently checked this to make sure I'm not forgetting or screwing up a detail in my mind, but I remember that when Bloodborne came out, that was actually the first PS4 exclusive that actually had a 90 or higher on Metacritic. Mm-hmm. And obviously, Metacritic doesn't mean everything. Like, I definitely don't sit there and look at Metacritic scores when I'm buying games. I know, like, console warriors like to sit there and, like, throw Metacritic scores at each other to show, that their favorite piece of plastic technology has better games. But I feel like because Bloodborne, like, if you look at the sales it made decent sales, but not, like, nowhere near as many as you would imagine based on the, like, just unanimous praise it's received from people who've played it. And, like, I really do feel like it's one of those games that, rightfully and deservedly, in my opinion, like, just got really stuck in people's minds because that was the PS4 game when it came out. Like, that was the top quality game, when it came out. And, like, that was just, that's just kind of, like, something I keep thinking about where, like, Bloodborne kind of came in and, I don't know, saved PlayStation 4 from meh games or whatever. But, it's a fantastic game. Like, people should try it out. One habit I've been broken of is the idea that, that there's such a thing as games that transcend psychographics, right? That like, there is a game that everyone of every taste will like. Definitely not true, but if you have any kind of appetite for action RPGs or action games, or a willingness and desire to maybe open your mind to something new, definitely try Bloodborne. It's very good.
Yeah, it is interesting to me that Bloodborne has such a high approval rating just based on how difficult it is. All the other games on that best of PS4 list were all, Uncharted, which is, you can make Uncharted difficult, but at its core, it's not hard. And God of War, which is more difficult than the old God of War games, but it's still not, it's not super punishing unless you want it to be. But Bloodborne is I don't know. I think Bloodborne is harder than... I don't think it's harder than Dark Souls 3, but I definitely think it's harder than Dark Souls 1 and 2 and Demon Souls. So, it is interesting to me that it has this, almost unanimous praise while being as difficult as it is.
I think just kind of removing some of those barriers, streamlining some of the RPG mechanics, making it strictly about mostly just one defensive maneuver, just kind of having that more exciting, fast-paced combat. It's one of those things where if people can see just kind of apparently that something is really fun and approachable like that, I think they might be more willing to really just kind of put in the vigor to really get into the game and actually learn it, even if they're having a hard time.
Mm-hmm. I think another part of it is just the atmosphere, the uniqueness. There's a million medieval games, even though Dark Souls has a lot of unique stuff to it. It's a game where, you can be, and a lot of people are, a guy in armor, you're a knight. It's medieval. But how many Victorian Gothic horror swinging to cosmic Lovecraftian horror games are there out there?
Yeah, exactly.
I thought you were, for a second, I thought you meant medieval as in the PlayStation exclusive medieval, and I was very confused because I'm
wait,
they
where are
made
you
more
going
than
with
one
this?
of those? They made more than one of the weird, bug-eyed skeleton man games that people kept comparing to Bloodborne when the remaster came out, and it blew my mind. I'm no. I'll let you compare Vampire to Bloodborne because I kind of get that, but no, you're not going to say medieval is Bloodborne.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. That's what I said to describe Vampire to people, is that it's
you're probably the reason I tried it.
AA budget Bloodborne type combat. That game's really good. One thing I wanted to ask you before we go is, by the time this episode comes out, I think that Bloodborne Demaster game will be out. Bloodborne PSX. Are you guys going to play that?
I'm in.
I'll probably take a look at it.
I'm going to play it. I'm playing as soon as it comes out.
If it has the system specs of a PlayStation 1 game, I'll be able to play it. But if it's if it takes more hardware than that, I probably can't. Which is sad.
It's not a literal PS1 game,
right. Yeah,
so it's not gonna require that little grunt, but they do have there's a bespoke original mode and a remaster mode, so you can play it at the lower PS1 style frame rate and lower resolution and stuff like that, and probably be fine even if you can't run the fancy version with super high definition and 60 FPS and all that.
It's going to be interesting. To the best of my knowledge, there haven't been a ton of things like this for Dark Souls. Now we have, remember that person was making that top-down Zelda, 2D Zelda type Bloodborne.
That's out there. That was a short fan game on itch.io. It's called Yarntown. Yeah, and it covers basically up to the cleric base.
So someone did that in that, top-down style. Now we have the PlayStation 1 demake style of Bloodborne. People fucking love this game, and I know I would be conflicted if they announced Bloodborne 2. I would play it, of course, but I would also be worried that they would fuck it up. But there's so much love out there for Bloodborne that surely this isn't going to be how this all finishes. Just, no next gen remaster, no PC port, nothing. It would be I don't know how unique this would be, but it would feel pretty unique to have a game that's this beloved that is just literally released, DLC, and then never touched again like that.
Yeah, it would be weird.
I feel that kind of ties into what I was saying before too, where it's like it's so beloved, but like there's this huge gulf between like how beloved it is and how like commercially successful it seems to have been. Mm-hmm. Like I don't remember the amount, but I think last I checked it was something like 3 million copies or something like that. It was years ago when I looked, so I don't remember the exact number, but it's one of those things where like those, you know, people who say that, like, you know, a game, like including in the industry, people who say that like a game is a failure if sold 3 million copies, like they can go to hell, honestly. Like that's ridiculous. But at the same time, that is the reality of how this industry look at those things. And if you look at how the reality of the industry looks at those things, like 3 million copies is not a lot. Like for comparison, Nier Automata is considered a fairly niche success, and that sold something like 2 million, 3 million copies or so.
Right.
So, you know, it is very sadly possible that Sony just looks at it and is like, oh, the ROI isn't there, basically, if we do anything else with this, which is dumb and sad, but
they may, depending on how much of a hit Elden Ring is, but we'll have to see how that goes. But anyway,
and we'll
guys,
have to see what Blue Point's working on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's true. That we have that possibility as well.
They will work on a remaster that completely changes how it looks and sounds, but refuses to touch anything about the gameplay, and then they will call it a remake instead of a remaster, and it will make me mad. but I will still buy it on day one and play it.
Well, before we get into territory that's going to make Moon mad, let's wrap this one up. And just want to say, Jake and Moon, thank you guys so much for coming on the show and talking about Bloodborne. This has been an episode I've been looking forward to a long time, something that a lot of times on the show, I am thinking like, I played this game, I want to do an episode. Anyone I know that has played it and has, you know, wants to talk about it, come on the show and talk about it. But like for Bloodborne, this is a very special game to me. So I was like, I want to make sure I pick the right guests, you know? So I'm glad to have you guys on the show because I knew this would be a good conversation. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I had a great time. Feels like I've gone full circle from discovering Bloodborne, discovering Duckfeed as a result, and now like 6 years after I played, actually becoming a podcaster American, you know? So
right.
about Bloodborne.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much for having me on. And similar, since I started podcasting and then, you know, got into Bloodborne, also discovered Bonfire Side Chat, Duckfeed and stuff, I want to podcast about Bloodborne, and finally was able to.
Yeah, this has been good. So once again, thank you guys so much, and thank everybody for listening. Please, once again, if you would like to support Tales from the Backlog, please go on your podcast platform of choice, leave a rating and review if you can. That will help a lot. Tell people about the show, share it around, and yeah, hit subscribe if you haven't already. We'll have lots of other really awesome games coming up on the show. And yeah, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time, the next game that comes out of my backlog. Bye, everybody.